and that way we could, I mean, that's common to everybody, those two.
And master plan as well.
Well, that's the master plan, that's the second page, I think.
Yeah.
And then just talk about those as a group, and then deal with the Bluewater specific.
Yeah, I think it's a great suggestion.
What were the two things?
The two things are the residential water meter upgrades and the water systems master plan, which are,
Was that the 2020 utility capital request?
yeah,
that's-
but those
Those are
lines
some-
appear on everybody's
Yeah, I know, that's what I was thinking,
capital budget,
we've got to
so
clarify that.
if we did it, and that way, if people don't wanna hang around to hear what everybody else has to say when their system comes up about that, then it's all done at once.
Yeah.
Sure, I can do that. So let's first talk about then the water meters. One of the things that we're recognizing with the operations folks here in the municipalities, a lot of the water meters, and we're talking about largely the residential water meters that connect each individual homes. Several of them have been updated with newer technologies and much more efficient in being able to collect the data and provide more data. A number of meters across the island are extremely old. There's still some manual read dial type meters out there, which are a lot more labor intensive and simply have a lot more challenges with them. So there's much improved technology today that would allow the crews to collect data they can collect data across the entire island, probably within an hour, because there's radio read technology out there, as opposed to today, which is a very labor-intensive process for them. Also, the advantages of some of the current technologies are to provide folks with a lot better information about usage. So not only is it more efficient to collect the data, but it provides more data. And I think their aspiration is that each individual resident would actually have access in a very timely fashion to their own information.
Rather than reading it themselves.
Rather than reading it themselves or needing to request it directly.
So they could have something in their house that let them see what their usage was?
Well, I think that would be a potential next step, but certainly I think one of the things we first explore is just how some kind of municipal-based administered system that can provide access to information. Certainly, perhaps a longer-term step could be for meters to be
Or could individuals
within
buy
individual residents. It's
an
possible.
attached on it, or you
There
want
there
that?
are modules available, and I
Yeah.
think that's something to explore. So the recommendation here is really broken down into two processes. It first starts with a business case. So recognizing that we believe there's an opportunity there, but we need to do further work to develop a business case to make sure it's a sound decision. There's certainly going to be an implementation cost, but we also appreciate the fact that a lot of the meters are going to need replacing regardless. So the first recommendation in 2021 is first to just do that business case, and that would inform future expenditures. But right now, so the 2022 would be considered a placeholder, but it would need to be validated through the business case to be conducted in 2021.
Any questions? Is that approximately $600 per resident
For which?
for the meter and the
various
software?
telemetry, yeah.
And that's the way you base that on?
I think it was, I'd have to read my records, but I think it was something in that order.
Okay.
Yeah,
Len, can you just clarify, because just so we get too far down here?
Yeah.
Like, you've come up with, for our budget, new main water line placeholder, replacing calibrate existing meters, or as somebody, and you've got 10,000, I think, has somebody gone through each of the meters in each of the water systems and determined that?
That's the same.
Well, it's just all part of what the first year is, the 2020.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I'm strictly responding to Allison's suggestion.
It's the residential water meter upgrades, the next one down, Steve.
It's the next one down, okay,
The
well,
next
that's,
one down, yeah. Yeah.
okay. But in 2020, you're proposing some significant, I haven't looked at everybody else's budget, but if somebody's
Yeah,
actually looked at all the meters and seeing which ones are,
Yeah, the one that you're referring to is strictly, the 10,000 is dealing with the municipalities' mainline meters,
Yeah.
as opposed to the next one down that I was speaking to was regarding the individual residential meters that are on each individual service line.
So wouldn't the new mainline meters be
Yeah.
aligned with this
Point of order.
technology?
Yeah.
Can we stick to one line item
Yeah.
on the agenda, please?
Okay.
Yeah, I got problems with everything, so don't worry about it.
I'm just trying to get some clarification so we didn't have to go through each thing. Anyway, yeah.
Can this new technology, water meters, be implemented but not necessarily be used currently, or used but not in the full technology? What you're doing is you're proposing that potentially an upgrade in 2022 of everything. Could you do it as a stepped process, like say span it over a couple year period? Just throwing that out there is that a possibility as well, depending on the hit that comes to potentially the raise of water user fees on a big lump sum item? Would that also come out of the capital reserve, or would that come out of the operating expenditures that's collected?
That's the money question that Roger would have to answer.
That would be a capital expenditure, and it would come out of the capital reserves.
Okay.
And how did you allocate the costs?
Oh, sorry.
I have two issues with this. One is that this was not a recommendation by our local LAC at all. Right. Two is, having said that, going to spend, I think, $600 per resident. I don't see any cost savings in the operating budget. You know, spend the money, but there's no cost savings.
Well, we haven't identified that. That would be part,
But, I mean, you're putting proposed, that's what I'm,
that's part of the business plan.
so then it should be taken off because it's not being reflected in the operating budgets.
I think part of the problem is though, I don't know that the operating budgets are shown multi-years out. The operating budget is only shown for next year.
But it's drafted for all those years. Or-
I agreed and understood, but that's, I support what you're saying, I agree with you, but part of the problem is, again, the operating budget that we're shown is a very narrow window. And I think the advantage of showing the operating budget over the same cycle as maybe the capital budget would show an opportunity to say, here's the impact of this capital project, operational costs may go down. And you can start to see the cost benefit analysis there.
I don't disagree with having them in, but having it put like that and no cost for us to understand what it's actually costing currently to read the meters, I can't agree with it.
That would
I thought
ultimately-
that it was said that this 2,400 was to establish a business case, so that's kind of, wasn't that said?
Yes.
And that's next year,
Yes.
or this year.
Yeah.
And I mean, then if you, I guess.
But that's
if you're looking at
2,400
it,
from-
Every water district? No, ours is 4,000.
Yeah. You know? That's
So what's
pretty,
the total cost?
what's the total cost for this business case?
Well, I'd have to add it up now that it's been segregated. I don't remember what the total.
It's well over $10,000, $15,000.
So Allison asked a question a minute ago, which would be really helpful to get an answer, which is how are these costs divided between the different water systems?
So currently, we've allocated these costs based on the number of connections in each system relative to the total number of.
So how many connections does Bluewater Park have?
What's the total?
I've got that on a separate slide. Annette, do you recall how many connections Bluewater Park has?
159 roughly.
And that's connected and unconnected or disconnected?
That is about a handful of unconnected and the rest connected.
So about 155 connected, is that what?
It would be based on the, yeah.
Is that connected being household usage or else combining with a non-service lot that's not developed yet? How is that factored?
Connected means
150.
generally a household usage.
So they're getting
Yeah.
use out of the water at that
What
point.
was the
Yeah,
gap?
because I'm, like, when I look through kind of the presentations that we received back last summer, and then again in the fall and October, I'm seeing numbers of around 150 connections, 145 connections. I did a quick calculation based on this year's budget of last year's $650 fee, divided that by the amount in the budget, and it comes up as 147 connections.
147 connections, 6 unconnected, which is what we have.
Okay, so we're now talking 147 connections, right? So that's the number that we're factoring in to calculate this. So when I first started looking at this, that I felt was an important number that could have been placed on the documents for each of the water districts. So King Edward Bay, 20-some connections, 147. So it gives us a better idea of what the numbers are per district based on the connections to help us calculate what we're looking at per connection. So going forward, I think that would be very helpful for us. And also when you have a number that's spanning between all the water districts, like this 45,600 for Bluewater, for instance, having a total somewhere, a summary total, as well as the water truck, how much of that is an overall total, various other things that would help all of us understand better what these numbers on a full scale would be.
So somebody had asked what the total cost of the business case was. It's $9,200 as tallied.
Yeah, no, I can answer that right away, because essentially I start with the total cost and then break it down. I just don't have those numbers with me right now.
Understood.
But I definitely do have them, on, basically at my desk.
I don't think the Cove Bay number would be in here though.
The
Cove
Cove Bay
Bay is
number
not in
is not in this package now.
Do we know how many connections Cove Bay has?
649, I believe.
Cove Bay is at 640.
Yeah.
And they're part of the whole calculation for all this too?
Yes, they are.
That what we're not seeing here today.
That's correct.
So that's going to apply for all the pro rata costs?
Yeah, that'll be for
Okay.
anything that is a shared project amongst all the water districts.
Can I just ask, do you have the numbers for each system? Could you read them out, please?
Yes, I have Cove Bay 640, Bluewater Park 147 connected, 6 unconnected, Consol Bay 130 connected and 14 unconnected. Eagle Cliff has 109 connections, Wood Point 93, Bowen Bay 60 and 1 unconnected, King Edward Bay 27 connected and 14 unconnected.
What was Bluewater again?
Bluewater Park is 147 connected and 6 unconnected.
And Wood Point doesn't have any unconnected?
640.
640, thank you.
I didn't get it.
Wood Point is 93 connections.
Okay,
King Edward Bay is 27.
Oh, and Bowen Bay, sorry.
130 for,
130 for Bowen Bay.
oh, sorry,
Bowen
for
Bay
Johnson.
60.
That's
60.
Consol. Bowen Bay is
60 connected, 1 unconnected.
60.
the last
Yes.
one.
So
has one.
so our
So
unconnected,
we will get that information in subsequent meetings, and Steph's recorded that, but moving forward with the project description and questions on the project in question that we're
Thank
talking
you.
about.
Thank you.
Do you have a rough idea, Glenn, as to how much time it takes to read the meter?
Trying to remember back, yes, it's, well, it's done multiple times a year, and I believe it takes about 2 days.
Per time?
Per time, yeah.
2
So-
days to read all the meters for the whole island?
So 2 days to read all the meters times the number of times per year it's read, so that would be the staff time saving, the gas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that,
So-
Well, part of, yeah,
and then the other side of it is the staff time spent transcribing those numbers into the billing system, which the
Yeah.
automated system would do,
and it's the quality and completeness of
And
data.
ease of-
as well.
referencing the bills and so
Yeah.
forth.
2 days.
Means you're gonna reduce staff?
Well, the reduced the amount that will get charged to the water system.
Well, one of the motivators is we currently have the operators collecting meter data, and one of the observations we had during some of the crises that we experienced last year is we had, because of the fixed requirements essentially to get meter information and get billings out, we actually had compromised reaction to some maintenance issues because of the importance. So the current crews are battling, looking after the system with reading meters. And so right now there's inadequate staff to meet the actual demand. So that's one of the motives for looking at new technology.
I don't think the meters were read in 2 days. That means a meter was being read every unit. There's about 1,000 meters here.
Not all of them. Some of them are able to, so there's quite a range of different meter technologies that are already installed. Some of them are quick read, others are more labor intensive. The intent is to convert everything to consistent.
So some places don't need to convert.
Correct. Yeah.
So one thing I'd like to point out to everybody is this is a 2021 and 2022 outer year project.
Mhm.
So this will come back to the committee next year when we are working on the 2021 budget. This is in the 5-year plan for planning purposes currently. So it's not a financial commitment to the water systems at this point in time, just in case anybody didn't quite catch that. as
Well,
we
I'm
were
in
talking
agreement,
about
I'm
earlier.
totally in agreement with having a business proposal put together. The cost of $10,000 for business proposal for this is,
Plus COVID,
pardon?
plus the COVID.
Well, I think it's for us too, total. What was the total cost of it?
Well, there's 9,200 in the sheets we've got
Yeah,
today,
okay, so it's 9,200.
plus code-based
Yeah.
shared, so.
That's pretty expensive.
Is it outside consultants studying this?
I think that's a lot of money to be spending on a business when, you know. There should be data that's available about how long it takes to dig up a meter, replace a meter. That should be available on the internet. You can put a budget to that. The cost of the meters, you can put a budget to.
It's not in this.
So what we can probably
And
do.
you know what it's costing to do currently.
Maybe in the interest of time, what we should do is go through the other common capital projects, and when it comes to a recommendation, each LAC will be able to make their recommendation on this item here. We won't make a joint recommendation. Here, we'll take each LAC's, and that's the way it's set out in the agenda, in terms of what projects we propose that, whatever comments we have.
I think what you're saying is really important because many of us, I think, have misunderstood what the purpose of today's meeting was. And we were looking for, we have some bylaws here and other water districts do not have bylaws. And I think your clarification, you're looking at me puzzledly. What point
They
doesn't
should all
have?
have bylaws.
There's bylaws inside everybody's packet.
These were amendment bylaws that the wrong document was included.
Sorry,
so-
I only saw in mine a 2017 bylaw.
Well, that's it. Everybody's just got their historical bylaws. These are historical.
Yeah, I understand the historical bylaws attached, but I was not understanding whether you expect us to pass bylaws
Oh, no,
today.
yeah, no, what you're gonna be doing is essentially
Good,
making
please
a
put that
recommendation.
out. Okay,
We won't be passing
recommendations.
bylaws, so essentially, I'm making recommendations for the budget, and then you will be making recommendations to council.
Seeking feedback
on-
back from
yeah,
us
so I'm
on
seeking
meter costs
feedback from
and.
you to provide council.
Okay.
And
as part of
anything
our budget.
that's 5 years out, even though we commit to it, we're supposedly, it's not, we're passing today's budget, it's
No.
not subject to, in stone, the future. It will
Exactly.
change each year.
So the focus should be on the 2020 items
2020.
is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, sorry to prolong this, but actually what we're saying is a bit contradictory. It's internally not consistent. I wonder if we could just make an agreement about a plan for establishing the business case. Now, I think we can all agree on that issue. We can debate the costs, but actually, we don't have Cove Bay here. So it's not like it's a vote, it's not like we're being properly represented. You know, we're making an argument in principle, whether the principle of having a business case for island-wide upgrading of our meter system is a good idea. Answer is yes, that's probably a good idea. But we don't know the cost yet, because we're not here with Cove Bay, they can't argue it either. So can we just have the principle, agree on the principle of establishing the business case?
With some caveats to it.
Well, the caveat that you've made is, I think, a really important one, that we have to see in the business case what savings are actually going to be made.
And it's another thing to do is, you have to understand, is it an appropriate thing to do at a certain time or at a different time? Just to do it universally across the island. You might be doing an upgrade in that area in 1 or 2 years. That's the time to be doing it, you know? I mean, this hasn't been thought through very well. The objective is a fine objective, but the variables have not been thought through.
That's the purpose of a business case.
But that's not the way it's presented. You know, it's presented that we're going to do this universally and so I'm all for the business plan, but right now you wouldn't have my support.
So would it help to simply strike the 2022 expenditure? Because that makes the assumption that we're moving ahead.
That would be a good start right there.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't think I necessarily agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a placeholder.
this is a.
I don't mind the business plan, I just think it's an expensive one.
I really appreciate that. This is a forward-looking document, it's not making any commitments for future years, it's a placeholder, we've been told that. Even the study to get to that is a placeholder, it's next year. We have another chance to discuss it, and we're already half an hour into the meeting, and we've done nothing but talk about this.
Yeah, I think including it highlights future opportunities and pressures on your reserves, which you otherwise wouldn't be aware of if we didn't include it in the outer year. And you're doing a business case because you're assuming that you're going to proceed, like you want to present the optimistic picture. I mean, you're doing, if the business case highlights you shouldn't do it, then you would remove it. But at this point in time, you're doing a business case because you believe there is merit in moving forward with this item.
It's a 5-year capital plan, it's not a 5-year carved in stone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you.
And each of these budget items are a rough estimate. Each activity would ultimately have to undergo a process of articulating the scope of work and creating a refined budget. Again, so just to emphasize that these are.
I've got a problem with the business plan, you know, I don't have a problem with that.
I'm taking that the next year is just a place marker,
Yeah.
that if the business plan would be successful. Let's do the next one.
Okay.
Do we have consensus for
I
move
think-
ahead
I
on the
think
business
so.
plan?
Well, as well as, you know, whether we need consensus now, I thought the idea was that each of the LACs is going to go through their individual capital plan and say yay, nay, discuss, et cetera.
Yeah.
So
That is the intention, and that's the way
And
the
if you
agenda
had
is
said
written.
that at the very beginning, I don't think a lot of this would be going on. And I appreciate what you're doing. You're making all of us aware of things that are coming up that we may not be aware of, which I think we all appreciate and thank you for. So I think we don't need consensus, we just need your explanation. And the other thing I just stress is that I think in the future, how these are allocated between the systems should really be on every page. As I added it up, there are 1,206 connections on these pages, of which each unit is a subcategory.
We'll take it.
Thank you.
Should I continue with the common items?
Yes.
So, the two other common items, actually, I guess there's three. We'll start with the easy ones. One, enhancement of GIS database. So there's a tremendous amount of data and records that the municipality has for all systems, many of which are PDFs, printed copies, old reports, a lot of information that's not readily accessible. Current technology, the geospatial database, which is what GIS stands for, the municipality already has an established foundation of a GIS system. However, currently the data, what's referred to as attributes for each component of the systems, it isn't currently in the system. So the power of a GIS digital system is completely underutilized. It's a desire that a lot of the awkwardly accessed data would be put into this GIS system, which greatly improves the efficiency of for operation and acquisition or sort of distribution of data.
So this is historical information or information going forward?
Well, it would be both. So what we do is we capitalize and import all the existing information and make sure the system is set up for continuing the digital entries for any new information
Can you
moving forward.
give some hard examples of what would go into the GIS database? Like
Sure.
each water meter and each?
Yeah, so currently the municipality already has what's referred to as a shape file, and that is, graphically speaking, if you were to log into this system, it shows pipes, it shows where a well is, it shows, so graphically, it's a schematic layout of the system. But attached to that are many attributes, such as the size of the pipe, the type of pipe, the age of the pipe. It can have condition information. It can have links to as-built drawings. It can have information about the operational components, flows. None of that information currently exists in the system. Right now, all it is a graphic schematic with very little information to understand what the system actually is or any of its attributes.
Put this on your system, then you're expecting to pay $70,000?
Yes, it's again, a placeholder. There's a tremendous amount, getting the systems, so the motive is that there's tremendous efficiencies once the system's built for accessing information and the operation of it, and ultimate decision making. It can track a tremendous amount, and it's got very powerful analytical tools with it as well. We, as professionals, I use it every day, and I can't imagine my life without it.
We need to retire.
Right now, it's a placeholder, again, more information, but there's a very labor-intensive process to go through all the historic manual records and extracting those attributes and getting it into a digital system.
So again, would this be another item that we should be looking at from a business case perspective up front? Because it's a substantial amount of money overall.
Yes.
But again, there's a potential benefit in that on the back end. There may be labor savings in having to go through all, finding as-built drawings, going through files, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yep. Well, we like to believe that there's a sound business case in all of these activities, and that would be part of the exercise of then
Approving it.
formulating an actual work program and refined budget would be to speak to the business case. Why are we doing this?
Okay.
I guess I just have a comment that it seems like this is probably part of a much bigger digitization of the municipality's operation, the record keeping and all those kinds of things. And a project like this isn't going to deliver another drop of water to anybody's house. Maybe this is actually more of a corporate investment rather than being distributed out piecemeal to the water system. I would hope if you did something like this, it would have links into other parts of the operation, roads, land use, other planning functions. It ought to have. And so, wouldn't it be better to remove it from this altogether and just make it a municipal project and finance it that way?
I think that this cost here is pertaining strictly to the water systems, and we do allocate administrative costs to the water system so that the water systems are like, essentially like corporate costs are allocated as well. So these costs would represent the effort for the water systems and should be paid by the water systems. They shouldn't be paid for corporately by the taxpayer.
So they'll
But
reduce.
every water
They are
user
part
is a
of the-
taxpayer.
Pardon?
Every
No, the
water
water-
user
yeah,
is
yeah,
a
the wa-
taxpayer.
They are the taxpayer as well. I mean, they are the same people, but you keep the funds separate. And so I believe that the costs that are related to the water system should be paid out of the water system and funded through water rates.
But so if staff's time goes down, will be allocated less administrative staff time.
Well,
So it will transfer through at some point.
That's
I have
the
a
goal, yeah.
technical question here. One thing in your explanation you didn't cover is the water flow pump usage, pump output and consumption. Is that gonna be all part of that system too?
No, that's the next item I was gonna speak to
Okay.
is,
So that's only really to do with the infrastructure.
correct.
The other,
Yeah.
the other piece that Glenn didn't touch on is that the municipality is working on developing an asset management plan for all of our assets. And an important part of that is a GIS database that includes your entire asset repository. So all of the information that Glenn was discussing, in addition to a GIS-based work order system. So you would know by going into your database what issues have occurred with that piece of infrastructure in the past and what work was done and when.
So I understand the idea that you want to get, you have to have an asset management plan. It's one of these things that becomes a time when you have no choice in the matter, you've got to do it, I get it, it's fine. I'm not sure about the GIS element of it, which is a bit of a toy in relation to it. There's lots of asset management plans without that. And there's a cost benefit about how much we're going to be spending on a very expensive GIS system, where we maybe don't need one, but relatively speaking, we're a small municipality. So I'd like to hear the case of why, and I get toys are valuable sometimes, really helpful and can really add value, but is it worth it in this municipality? You suggest that it is, I haven't heard the argument yet.
We will formulate the argument.
We've
One
got
thing
2
I-
years, it's not till 2022.
One of the things I would like to clarify though, this GIS is not a toy. GIS is a very important, valuable tool, state-of-the-art for allowing municipalities to make proper decisions, properly informed decisions in a timely manner.
That's the argument I'm waiting to hear, that's great.
And these costs are also not for the GIS system, it's for the data. We actually have access to the ESRI GIS system through belonging to the Islands Trust.
So what's the total to put all this information in?
Like I said, we need to go through this. I mean, these are placeholders at the moment.
Okay.
We need to go through an exercise.
2 years to look at it.
articulating
I appreciate the work.
The next item, which I think more succinctly answered your questions about flows, pumps, etc. So there's a digital system referred to as FlowWorks. That's the trade name of it. And it's also similar to GIS, but it's more operational information. This municipality has it in place, and it's been a valuable tool. However, in my time here and trying to access and use the information, I find that the setup has been not optimized. I think there's, in some cases, additional information that should be added, and in some cases, simply reporting the information differently to make more clear decisions and interpretation of the data. Right now, I think there's huge risk of misinterpretation, and it's reported in a way that will lead to inappropriate decisions. So my recommendation has been to do a bit of a makeover of reviewing all the data and how it's collected and reported, and make some improvements. So that's what that's all about.
And it doesn't matter whether it's groundwater or surface water sources, it's all to do with what comes out of the system.
Yeah,
Right,
so
right
this,
through.
this system, so anything that has a meter or a data logger, so we have individual meters, we have wells where we're monitoring pumps going on and off, how much flow, we have flow meters of various kinds and have intent to install additional flow meters. We have our well monitors in right now, King Edward Bay is the only one that actually has aquifer levels. So there's continuous monitoring of these systems. There's the reservoir water levels. As you know, when we were exploring Bluewater in King Edward Bay, we were closely looking at reservoir levels. All of that data, which is collected automatically through different sensors and meters, all of that data goes into this FlowWorks database, and that's how the municipality accesses that data. But it's important, like I said, it's important that the setup of that data and how it's reported is done appropriately. So we're not revamping the collection of the data, we're revamping how it's actually deposited into the software and the actual units and the setup of it.
So it's not a software change or upgrade, it's literally a programming within.
Yes, it's a programming issue within how the data is actually reported and deposited and reported.
And
Correct.
complementing with the appropriate equipment and installed to support monitoring.
Yes,
Yeah.
So there's already.
So technically, this would have helped us out in Bluewater last year had we had a more robust
Yes.
database.
Yeah, the compatibility already exists. Like I said, the system is up and running and it's adequate. It's just, for example, there's some things that are reporting as a percentage of something. And a percentage to me is useless without understanding I'd rather have like it's meters of something or it's gallons of something as a percentage. Percentage is meaningless unless you know the boundaries of that range.
Right.
And that's one of the problems that we've been having, even with King Edward Bay. The aquifer levels currently are reporting as a percentage, but there's no information about what the actual level of the sensor or the monitoring device is, so even percentage is actually a.
Is it increasing?
It has been, yes.
And that's another $60,000 study?
I think that's a generous number, but again, we need to go through.
It's 46,000
we
if you
need-
throw in
Yeah.
COSIC.
That one, so there's an external consultant who, so the FlowWorks is, I think virtually every municipality in Greater Vancouver uses it. It's a regular tool that I access data of all municipalities when I serve them. And so it's a very widely used system, but it's a proprietary system that each individual municipality subscribes to. So there's a company, an outside company that does all the programming and the setup of the accounts. So we will have to go to them and tell them what we want changed, and then they will provide a quote to do those changes on the municipality.
The data, you know, I've looked at the FlowWorks charts here, not in the last few years, but 3 to 6 years, you know, I've looked at it quite often. There's a lot of information there. It's a good system, it's good data gathering system.
Yep.
It's a bit difficult to navigate at times,
Yep.
but it's not impossible. I mean,
Yep.
I'm a layperson, I can navigate it.
Yep. No, again, I mean, it was vital when we were going through the water crises of last summer. It was vital to me. I looked at it multiple times a day, and it was my quick access to that information.
So-
But again, the key is to make sure that it's providing you the information to make very quick and sound decisions with.
So is this also part of the system referred to as the SCADA, or that's?
Essentially.
Yes, okay.
Take it down.
So, unless there's no further questions on that one, the last one is the water systems master plan, which you're all familiar with. That one has been discussed in past meetings. Just the status of that, again, it's strictly a placeholder. Perhaps you guys can speak to how we've done the allocation, because I remember that was something that was everybody's heart, was how that cost was going to be distributed. But
Sorry, this one is not a placeholder, this is scheduled for 2020.
correct, yeah.
So that's not a place.
That's not a placeholder.
Sorry, a placeholder in terms of the actual budget. Right now, the municipality is developing a full articulated terms of reference, and then that study would then have to go to an open tender for.
So what you're saying is it's not a placeholder, it's an estimate.
It's an estimate.
It's a wild ass guess
Sure.
estimate.
Sure.
Hopefully not, well, that's,
Well,
It's a huge amount of money.
yeah.
So there's a tremendous amount of work to do it properly, a lot of technical work.
I think, can I just, King River Bay has previously corresponded on this, and I know I've spoken to a couple of other people from there is a question about it being an estimate perhaps, but there's another question about whether or not we really want to do it.
whether it's necessary. Eagle Cliff's the same way.
And I think I'd be surprised amongst the LACs if there actually is support for it, for a number of very good reasons. The one is that our systems are so separate currently, and they will, because of geography, and so they will never be integrated. They can't be. Hood Point's never going to have anything to do with Bowen Bay. And as an obvious example, but there are many examples of that kind. And at the moment, there are so many things to spend money on that each LAC has got real priorities and some real changes. And if we're going to be thinking about spending that money, you just remind us about how much the total cost was anticipated.
300 and some.
It was
So it's 300,000.
We're talking about circa $250,000, and what can we do for the water infrastructure for that kind of money if we wanted to spend that kind of money?
Well, I look at it from Bowen Bay and I said, that's $500 for residents, $30,000. I'm looking
Well,
at, no, just let me carry on.
Sure.
Right? And I look at the capital expenditure of this for this first year. $65,000 in Bowen Bay. Okay? 2/3 of our capital gone. Benefits to the Bowen Bay, pretty minimal today. Maybe there's some benefits long term. Benefits like, having inline metering systems at the junction points of this system, so there's leak. That's fine, but without having the system engineered for an upgrade later, is this the time to do it? I'm looking at it and going, 65, and you put in the next year, we're into $100,000, right, with all the meters and things. We're looking at it probably upgrading our whole system with a tank, water line, and fire hydrants. And King Edward Bay would really be happy to have somebody like that around them. And we're looking at about 1.2 million. So we just blew away $100,000 of that, and we didn't get anywhere much further down the road.
I think one of the things that perhaps hasn't been done, and I appreciate your viewpoint, but again, the master plan is largely in response to the recognition that we have significantly depleted water sources, and we haven't even accounted for climate change and growth, community growth. The focus of this master plan is to ensure a sustainable water supply and the optimum performance and configuration of these systems long term. I believe you all have a keen interest.
But again,
in
Glenn,
ensuring-
with due respect,
Yep,
and I understand what you're saying there and appreciate it,
yep,
but as has been pointed out,
Yep.
the systems will never be connected.
you don't know that.
No, we don't know that.
You don't know that.
No, we don't know that.
That's part of the master plan, is to determine where are the supplies, where are the demands that are sustainable, and how to optimize the performance of these systems. connectivity, you don't know the answer to that, I don't know the answer to that. That's a question that will be answered through
But
master
probably
plan.
someday, I think it's fair to say, someday, the whole west side will be connected. Not maybe in my lifetime, maybe nobody's lifetime when you're sitting in the state. You know, from Tunsil Bay to Bluewater, there will be connected.
There's also another demand on the municipality. Keep in mind that the municipality does, while we appreciate the advice and the role of the LAC, the municipality also has a very important fiduciary responsibility to deliver safe, sustainable water to its communities. The other influence here is we also do have a tremendous amount of private communal water systems on the island that are currently not the responsibility of the municipality. But there is increasing pressure of the municipality to see by the province to see the municipality take on these systems. That's an additional burden, and that's one of the additional items that is intended to be looked at under the water master plan is, one, these private systems, really off the radar for us right now, are still influencing the municipal systems that we're here talking about, and also ultimately could be the responsibility of the municipality to look after.
Is
The
it, sorry,
municipality needs to understand that.
can I interrupt you, but just that one point, is that the municipality, those off systems, those outside of the LACs are not paying for this.
Currently, there's no mechanisms to capture that.
So when
Well,
that,
well,
There may be,
put it in
there's
the
other
municipal
way.
budget.
There's a municipal budget in which it could be.
so that could be a portion of corporate.
Well, certainly, I mean, offline.
Yeah, so when you start looking at
Radic's
overall
something,
island plan,
and look
this
at
is
how that would capture it, but, yeah.
individual water wells,
Yeah.
private water systems,
Yeah.
Cowan Point area. You're looking at an island-wide plan.
Absolutely, and that's the intent.
So to bear the cost just on the 7 water systems to cover this, I think it needs to be thought of that, definitely.
Sure. That's a fair question.
Because it's gonna benefit all, it's
That-
gonna be water
Yeah.
conservation, what we're gonna do when our aquifers all over the island starts getting too low to sustain.
of the
Yeah.
4,500 people, 7,200 people, I think the OCP says that ultimately our catch-all rate is for the island. So I think this needs to be a broader plan here than just what we're dealing with within the water system.
Absolutely.
You know, for $100,000, you could buy probably $2,000 gallon tanks for every resident of Bowen Bay.
Tom says.
Tom?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I don't know the answer to this question. There are 1,206 connections sitting at this table.
Mm.
What is the number of unrepresented water connections on the island? Is it twice this number? Is it 5 times this number? I really would like to get some sense of who isn't at this table. Can you help me?
Well, an average number of lots, properties.
Based on the
Well,
taxpayers'
based-
property.
Yeah, sorry, based on numbers I've seen before, I believe almost half of the connections are, I mean, I'm just giving you an
Yeah.
estimate, are off the grid. And so gentlemen there raise a good point in terms of the allocation that we've made has been allocated amongst just the 1,200 connected properties, but perhaps there is an argument there that because we're looking at this island-wide, that the funding formula should definitely be revisited.
So if I'm understanding the answer to my question, you're guesstimating that there are 2,400 connections
About
on
there,
Bowen?
yeah.
So twice what's represented by the
Yeah,
current.
Yeah, we
half,
have
we're
to-
half of
We
the
have to
issue.
look at the ordinarily occupied and the unoccupied, the number of houses. There's about 2,200 properties in the tax roll, but I think there's about 500 of those that aren't occupied. They're vacant lots. I didn't bring that binder. I can go and check quickly.
Well, at this point-
and-
But to give you
yeah.
context,
Yeah,
I think
that's
we've
fine.
got
Thank you.
numbers to give you
Yeah.
context.
Yeah, so the other question, I guess, the thing that I wanted to raise, now that you're bringing up private systems, I'll speak on behalf of private systems. There's a difference to me with the data that needs to be gathered for surface water versus aquifer water.
Yes.
And at this point, you've just allocated it out on the basis of the number of connections. Yet, there's a lot of systems that probably already have a lot of the data. you're looking at. Or when you apply for surface water licenses, you have to prove to the province that you're not impacting all the other licenses. So just to carve it up on the basis of the number of connections doesn't seem fair based on the amount of work that's going to have to be done. In some areas, a
Each
lot.
system should be looked at individually as to
Yeah.
their source, how they get water. A master plan would look at the whole island, and then you could go, like we always do, back to the individual system and say, okay, it's gonna cost this much to look at your
Research
system.
your aquifers,
Your
yeah.
system's pretty straightforward, fine, it's complicated, then it's more.
That was point, if I may, that was point 15 of the recommendations.
Yeah.
From council.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes?
Since, I mean, I really like the point that was brought up here, and then it strikes me that this is a global problem for the island, and it should not be removed, it should be removed from the water district and be a tax issue across the board. It shouldn't be here.
Are there grants available for discussion?
There can be, yep. One isn't available at this timeframe. The grants are always done in cycles. There's currently not an influx of applications for a program. There's one coming up again next year that was intended to be applied for an imported sanitary wastewater treatment plant upgrade.
What about the provincial planning boards? Is that sort of thing that?
Yeah,
They're an open intake.
It is, it's $10,000, so
Yeah,
it's
that's
not a huge.
Can I suggest that right now this study is falling entirely on the water boards, and yet it applies to everybody who lives in Bowen. It strikes me that this should be cautiously removed from the districts and passed on to everybody on Bowen as a change in taxes,
Yep.
so that everyone pays for it.
Echoed the comment here just made.
Yes.
So when we come to the recommendations, we can have each of the chairs make that recommendation, and we'll take that forward to council.
Right, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Next.
So have we gotten through all of the?
Those are all, those are all the comments.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna follow the agenda here and actually,
Just a minute,
Uh,
Raj,
pardon?
sorry, Dave just raised that the truck is also an
A
across
chair,
the
yeah.
the board recommendation too. Do we want to touch on that one at the same time, or?
Isn't the truck partially paid for, it's like carryover?
No, this would be the replacement of an existing vehicle that is end of life. So again, the truck, the total cost, I believe, is, I can't recall, I believe it's about $50,000. So it's been allocated to each of the, proportionately, yeah.
Is it a tanker truck, or is it just one of the trucks that the
I
guys?
believe
run
it's
around?
one of the pickup trucks.
Service truck.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of the service
So,
pickup.
so we just purchased, recently we purchased a truck.
Yeah, there's a fleet,
Just last
there's
Yeah,
a,
but
there's
for water.
For
We
water,
have
yeah.
two water trucks?
I believe you have.
Yeah, a couple of years
If I'm
ago,
not
it was in the
mistaken.
budget.
Yeah. Now, how many we got?
Pardon?
How many we got?
I believe there's 3.
Water trucks?
Are they just used for the water districts?
Yes, as far as I'm
They
aware.
do, and
And what is the purpose of them?
Yes.
To clarify
Yeah.
the term water truck, we're not talking a truck that holds.
No, no.
I got that impression.
Service
pickup.
That's why I was clarifying.
Yeah, that's why I was making the.
So you're replacing a pickup type truck
Yeah, pickup
used by
type
the water.
It's a
Yeah,
water
used by the
department.
water, yes.
One of three.
I believe it's one of 3. I will confirm that for.
would
Is it
like-
one of 3 in that, or one of 2?
I believe so too, yeah.
Yeah, I believe it's one
We've
of
got
3.
trucks for water.
And how
So-
many employees are directly involved in water?
Two?
No.
Four.
Yes.
I think 4, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, probably.
And what is the purpose
5.
of the trucks?
5?
To
Okay.
get them out to read your meters.
Read meters.
No. So for example, every day the water samples have to be tested. That's one person with one truck every day. And then 2 people are doing maintenance, repairs,
Maintenance,
calls
yeah.
that they get. There are other, like,
There's meter
when
readers.
there are projects ongoing, there's another couple of people attending to these. So that makes already 3 vehicles.
It needs to be a truck.
Well, that's where I'm going with this. Does it have to be a truck?
A $50,000 truck.
Yeah, or do we look at hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, things like that, that potentially is gonna move us into more conservation type of scenarios for, meter reading doesn't need a truck, does it?
That's minor point.
And it's in the future, yeah, so does it need to be a truck? Should we look at alternatives, possibly?
I'd have to defer that to our superintendent of public works. Yeah, we can definitely look
As
into
a
that and
vehicle,
what
as
to
a
do.
replacement of a vehicle, is that?
We still have time, right now, we have a provision for a vehicle in the budget, if we can, and we can go back to staff and take a look at that, and whatever it's replaced with, I mean, essentially, if we put a placeholder at 50, if we can replace it with something that's 35, then only 35 will come out of the budget, so that will be adjusted. But your point, in terms of whether, the type of vehicle that we need, we will go back and look at that with staff.
I don't want to meddle with.
Four-wheel drive pickups would be easier than this.
Right, I don't want to meddle
Then when
with
it
this
snows,
operational, but this would be more strategic from an overall conservation, climate change planning point. How's that?
Well taken, so, yeah, but regardless, I mean, a vehicle needs to be replaced due to safety issues and it's at end of useful life, so we'll take a look into what it's being replaced with. And my apology, I mean, I may have spoken out of turn, it may be a $35,000 vehicle, I just recall one year there was a $50,000 one, so I don't have the total cost in front of me again because we've broken it out by each water district. Did Bluewater, LAC members from Bluewater want any explanations of the individual items within Bluewater, or are they self-explanatory?
I got
And
a
if so,
few.
Glenn will answer them.
So point number one, Bluewater new totalizer water meter, that was not replaced in 2019 during the repairs to the system?
No, this is, right now, each individual well has its own meter, and I'd have to go back and check my notes on that, but this is a totalizer, so it's installing a new meter to provide better information about the total output of the wells in combination, as opposed to the individual.
Now, that same wording, when you look further down under manual well water level measuring device, it's exact same description wording. Is that a
Okay.
error?
Just an error, yeah.
Okay, so I guess we'll need an explanation when we get down to that line item, okay?
Yeah.
Second one, permanent aquifer monitoring. We did discuss this last year during stage 4 crisis and follow-up, and your recommendation to the council, so I don't think we have a problem with that. It's much needed for 3 of the 4 wells, because 1 well is kaput.
Yeah, I think we're not even convinced we necessarily need to monitor all 3 wells. We're gonna make some priority decisions about which ones. 1 can be a proxy for the others, or 2 can be a proxy for all of them,
So more
still making decisions on that.
more detailed design on
Yeah,
that.
I'm still hashing that out with the hydrogeologist.
Third one, remove all downhole equipment from well number 2. That's the one that's not coming back, so you want to pull out the equipment, salvage it, reuse if possible for
Yeah,
parts.
this is the temporary, so during the investigation from last year, there was temporary equipment.
Oh, that's a temporary.
Yeah, so this is removal of the temporary equipment, which was not intended to stay in permanently.
Okay. Replace well pump 3, we discussed that in last year's engineering detail follow-up, so that's fine. Shallow aquifer pump test, that's for 2021. That's just a placeholder, no issues with that. And then manual well water level measuring device, so that's the repeat description, so maybe a bit more clarity on what that is.
Yeah, so that is, so we had intent to install permanent. There's a number of wells across Iowa in all systems where we would like to install permanent. But there's also a desire just to have as a piece of equipment to allow the crews to go around and manually read wells that don't have a permanent setup. It's just to give them freedom to be able to do manual checks on those that don't have permanent equipment.
Okay, so that was my question, is that since we're gonna be installing permanent monitoring devices, there's really not a need for that for Bluewater. Is this a shared cost between all the water districts then? If it's gonna be used across the districts?
It would be a device that would be owned by the operations crews.
Does that show up on anybody else's? So, are we paying the bill for that? Merry Christmas.
You know, I don't care what the dance is.
I know, it's $1,500, but just trying to understand here. Yeah, wonderful.
We'll have to, I haven't had the opportunity to touch base with Raj prior to this meeting on this, so we'll have to go back and review that one.
Okay, thank you. The next one is new main line and water meter and replacements, placeholder. So this you indicated as more mainline water meters potentially replaced and not residential individual meters, as you stated earlier.
Correct. Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
So I believe we replaced the mainline meters in 2019 during the crisis, right? According to your past engineering reports.
One of them for sure was.
I talked to crews and they said they did too.
Okay.
So that's another one that's possibly
Correct, and that's why we use the word placeholder.
Placeholder,
Just
so that may or may not.
Further assess whether anything further was required on that.
Well, when you do these types of things with meters, do you look ahead to the potential telemetry needs? I mean, wouldn't these need to be compatible with wherever we're planning to go?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they are, many of the meters are already connected to that flow work system that I was referring to, so.
So when they were done last year, were they done in an 8-inch line?
Sorry.
What was it long, were they done in an 8-inch line, or they?
Can't remember the size of the line,
Yeah.
but they are the main meter that,
I know one of them is going to be tied into the new 8-inch line.
yeah, that links the two, the Bluewater and King Edward Bay systems. Yeah.
Okay. So the other one, provision replacement of equipment, water main, break, repair, so that's just another placeholder of things that come up potentially throughout the year.
Correct.
Okay. There was mention that the Bluewater tank level is only providing capacity of 40% in the tank because of the elevation difference to the King Edward Bay tank, so we're getting back cycling out of the Bluewater tank. I don't see any provision for adjusting or adding equipment to deal with that issue. So currently, we're under capacity for storage in that tank, so is there
Correct.
plans for 2020?
Well, that's one of the things in the further work was to look at the operation of the system. That would have been one of the items that would be addressed through the master plan, is looking at that operation.
But that's storage that we need.
Yeah,
So
we can certainly advance.
I think.
We can certainly advance that as an item. Right now,
Yeah.
right now, the demands seem to be being met, and I continue to look at the system, and things are stable. And if we want to advance that, that's certainly something that can be done.
I think if we look at the different numbers here and puts and takes and that, I think that's probably something that we should take a closer look for 2020 to solve, because that's
Yep.
how many thousands of gallons of water, especially in the summer months, that is nice to have around.
Yep, for
And
sure.
when you look at the flow rates coming out of the main and the secondary, we talked about that last week on site.
Yeah.
We could potentially be using that tank per day in Bluewater just to sustain basic 125 to 150 gallon usage per household.
Yep.
Which isn't a lot,
Yeah.
unless we really start pushing for conservation efforts and individuals having additional home storage themselves.
Yep.
So, okay. One final thing, the line replacements, which we talked about at the meeting, 87 meters going to 8-inch, correct?
Yeah,
And
that's,
that provision for cost has been from the 2019 allocated in the budget already, correct?
yes,
So that's covered, so that doesn't reflect here in any
It'll be a
of our
carry forward, yeah.
carry forward, so.
that's happening now.
And we're finalizing pricing and, so that'll be.
There's a pre-construction meeting this morning, and
Good.
that'll get underway
Good.
shortly.
And then we've got the resolutions in that that's a 50-50 split.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll be taking care of that in the accounting.
Great. It would be helpful to have the actuals for 2019 in the columns on page 9, but.
The reason they're not here is because we're gonna be going through an audit, so when we come up in the June, we'll have a June meeting, so we're kind of, as part of the recommendations, when we come back to report, like our annual general meeting, we'll have 2019 results for you at the June LAC meetings. It's just they're preliminary right now, so things can change, and as a result, I'm reluctant to publish 2019 actual results
But I agree,
before
a
all our
year-to-date,
entries are made.
a
Pardon?
year-to-date column would still be a good baseline, so we can at least see where approximately we are, understanding that there's still change to occur.
You put estimate underneath.
I could put estimate underneath of the measure,
That would be helpful.
but as long as every, you know, with the caveat that these are unadjusted numbers and they're subject to audit.
Understood.
Yeah, okay.
So getting down to the operation budget recommendations, I did a little bit of calculation based on the 147.
Actually, before we go to that, can we finish dealing, finish dealing with the Bluewater LAC capital budget? So we have a recommendation on this item where we're discussing these items, that the Bluewater, I guess we'll have a revised recommendation as well, but that the Bluewater Park System Local Advisory Committee recommend to council that the capital initiatives for the 2020-2024, we need to revise that financial plan as presented at the February 25th joint water system budget meeting, be included in the 5-year financial plan, and that the allocation method for funding the water master study take into consideration private island water systems. Is that what we?
I
I think we said we wanted it removed from the water boards,
Yes.
period.
Yes,
You wanted, okay, maybe we could.
it become a global residential.
So say the 5-year
And that-
financial plan with the removal of,
Well, actually, I think you want the project to proceed, but you want it to be not funded through the water systems, is what you're saying. So you do support the water master study.
Well,
Some of us do.
Maybe. Well, I actually, so, I mean, yeah, so I should be actually asking this question of the Bluewater Park representative.
I think what you have to do
It's all-
here. you gotta
It'll be the same wording for
try to
everybody.
I think it's gonna be the same for everybody.
Pardon?
It's gonna be the same for everybody. I think we're a little bit too premature in detailing these recommendations right now based on some of the changes, discussions, plan costs. I think we need to go back and rework these recommendations.
Could you put
I
the
can't
word,
support these right now.
could you put the word blue water specific?
Where?
Yeah.
Capital initiatives in that resolution, so you're only voting on the ones that
Yeah.
solely relate to blue water?
Okay.
Would that solve it?
Well, I mean, I think we've got a problem, and that is that, as I read the bylaw, we're supposed to have as a committee, we're supposed to have a meeting with the municipality. And as we are here today, we're all together, which is wonderful to meet you guys. But there's only 2 of us here. We're not a quorum for our committee.
this is a budget information session.
I don't think
And
we're in a
It's a
position
proposed
to-
budget, we haven't kind of met to discuss this, you're inviting us to make very clear recommendations that our caucuses, as it were, haven't discussed. So, from the point of view of our discussion, the people that are here, I suspect there's a consensus. We don't want that
Okay.
plan in the budget at all to affect us.
So would you be amicable to us actually not making recommendations at this meeting, and we'll record your input and we'll provide that to council? We'll
I think that's very reasonable.
Okay, I mean, as a compromise, you don't have to follow this.
Well, we don't have choice, we don't have quorum. What you have is a bunch of retired guys who have their mind. You're degrading,
Degrading is all. Tired people. I went to a session on gender neutrality and inclusion.
This is not a retired guy.
Guys, it's gender neutral for me too.
Okay, all right.
I think
Truth doesn't hurt.
I just want to make a comment about the master plan, which, we've been discussing and there's varying levels of support for. Another aspect of it is with all of the aging infrastructure in all of these water systems, we want to get to a point where we're not just reacting to crises, that we've got a plan for capital maintenance and replacement that we're working towards. And that's an element of the plan too that is actually specific to the water systems. It's about water sources as well as governance of the systems and maintenance of the infrastructure and capital replacement. We're in a position where the reserves of the water systems are not in alignment with what we know the capital replacement needs are going to be over the next 10 years, 30 years. And we need a plan for that. We need to plan for how to address that.
Fair enough, but I do believe that we are in a position where we're reacting to crises right now.
We are.
And we need to have funds available for that as
For
well.
those
So
crises.
It's about timing,
Yeah.
it's about getting the needs taken care of.
But that seems like two separate issues. A master
Yeah.
plan to discuss aquifers and sources of water is something that if you think the whole island should do, that's fine. But each individual system should either adopt something to say they will have their system reviewed, and I would say in-house first by yourself, as an engineer, and say, okay, I've identified some issue. Now do we go to the next phase of getting you consultants or engineers or somebody over and above? But to just start off assuming that we all have the same problem, and we've all said it again, each system is so totally different with its source, infrastructure, age of infrastructure, levels of service, all that stuff.
It would be nice if the proposal were put forward that separated the island sustainability issue
Yeah.
from the infrastructure deficit issue. And in terms of the sustainability issue, I understand there's a provincial sustainability program that you might be able to get involved in and get some provincial money that would assist on that.
Okay. And looking at what we went through in 2019, there was a fair amount of information gathered by the hydrologists, the consulting firm that Glenn brought in on the Bluewater system. So that's a good head start for us that we've already paid for out of our contingency from last year. So we've got a good head start on already. So to then go and revisit all that same information again doesn't make sense for us. We need to start, and as I can see in the fees for this year, you've upped our capital reserve to $200 per connection, it looks like I'm seeing, from $100 from last year. So it's a good start, but we need to start now planning on how we're gonna spend this capital reserve over the next 10 years, because we're facing 50-year-old pipes that need to be replaced. And $100 a year isn't, not that I wanna say we need to spend more or need to collect more money from anybody, but $100 a year actually isn't gonna do it over 10 years.
No.
So to wait for another study and a master plan is more time lost to start putting more money in the bank for what we know we have to do.
And spending a lot of money for that master plan where we actually need the infrastructure more. I know there's a question about the sustainability of the water aquifer. But speaking from the little duchy of Bowen Bay, and I don't have a quorum here either, so I can't do anything. I'm not even chair anymore. So, speaking from the duchy there, our pumps exceed our demand. We have never had one. Never. No. That doesn't mean there won't come a day that the community will come by and say, we're gonna make you guys all united, and we're just gonna go ahead and do it. I understand that can happen, and yes, there'll be tanks and some of this water will be flowing up. But for Bowen Bay, all this is, except for probably the metering at the junction points of the pipe,
It's a waste of money.
We got that point.
Can we just step back and get some clarity again on what you want from this meeting? Because I'm getting the impression that you want recommendations from, but we've made it pretty clear, well, most of us, I think, are not in a position to do that at this point. So what would you like to
So
get from this meeting?
I think what we'll do is we're compiling your input in the minutes. So we will basically, based on the comments that we've received, we'll provide feedback to council on that rather than seeking the recommendations as they were in the agenda.
Would you like us to go back and come up with our recommendations based on the discussions today? Or would you like to just take the feedback to council as it is?
Sorry, Alice?
Well, the question I was going to ask about the feedback, we did is staff's going to do a very detailed set of minutes, I presume, but is all that feedback going to be captured and will the LACs get a chance to look at
To
it
review it.
before it goes to council?
Agreed.
To make sure that
Critical should be a
the
draft.
staff has, which she's usually pretty good at, captured what they thought they were saying.
So what I envision we'll have is we'll take your feedback, we can get Steph to send it back to confirm from the people who were present at this meeting that their comments are captured, but we will still have staff recommendations which may differ from what the LACs are actually recommending to council. We'll have our own staff, we'll have the staff recommendations on the budget to council as well.
Well, if we as various groups have different recommendations, which we haven't formulated yet because we didn't have the information, wouldn't it be more logical for us to generate those recommendations rather than provide a hodgepodge of comments to council that aren't really clear recommendations? I mean, our job is to advise, right? Be consulted with and advise. And people are being consulted with, but we're not in a position to advise yet because we haven't discussed it in our individual committees and perhaps even voted on them because we may not all agree. I'm pretty sure we won't.
It's, you know, with all due respect, and I know everybody's got their stuff to do here, but, you know, I got this on Thursday, I think. I've been in Phoenix in meetings since that time. You know? And and only this morning I had a chance to look at it.
Yeah, so when is this going to council?
This will be going to council in a late March council meeting.
Because of course, we're all as taxpayers, citizens, entitled to make representations directly to council. But I would like, and we may do that, but we would like it to be cogent and helpful, which is why we need this information as soon as possible.
So March 23rd meeting is the one you're aiming for?
Is that it?
Targeting for it.
So perhaps then we could, just to be helpful, it would save us a lot of time if we just delete all the recommendations and have the information on the various items that there are.
Just interesting, a lot of the recommendations for each individual LAC here are the recommendations that were brought forward by each individual LAC through last year's meetings. The new ones that you would not have seen before are the common ones.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
Master plan, flow works, everything else. So the ones that I've already spoken to, you wouldn't have seen. Everything else.
I meant the common ones, actually. I didn't
They were
know
just an
those.
idea with no numbers.
So, and that shows in the discussion.
Yeah.
Just two comments. One, seeing the 2019 actuals with caveats on them would really help all of us. And
You won't see them in time for these recommendations.
Even partial years.
I mean, in the future, I will have the current year, but for this particular budget cycle, with our budget going forward to council, I simply don't have the resources in-house to get that together within a week in this format for you guys. as a
this
compare.
is just an example from ours.
Yeah,
In 2017 or 18, we had to incur a special,
It was earlier than that. It was
even earlier than
2017.
2017, a special legal bill in regard to our water licenses. That was a one-time event. That additional $7,500 has been carried through every year into the future, which doesn't need to exist. We just looked at it.
Yeah.
So
it was a provision put in the budget and it never got spent, but the total budget appears, yeah.
And I'm not complaining,
Yeah.
but unless we see
Can we
draft
talk about that
numbers-
specifically when we get to your
Sure.
operating budget?
The other thing I'd
Okay.
like to say, second thing, is that, Patrick, your recommendation, I endorse, that each system should be looked at individually to understand what needs to be done in the next 10 years. Or 30, all of it.
And-
Yes,
and
I
if
think,
that
and
system's
rather
gone.
than some master plan, the systems are so different that each one needs to be looked at. And I know our system is prepared, to invite you and to hire whoever is needed to give us some sense. That's really important. That's why we're really here.
Thank you. I'm gonna move into actually try to get to the Bluewater presentation and then move on to the others. So I've just got a slide that's kind of summarizing what we had talked about. Sorry, the 149, it should be 99.3, and it ties into the report that I had given you. I had added an extra 50,000 here by accident for the project that's going to be carried forward. So it's going to be carried forward, it's not coming out of the new year. So, but essentially the point to look at here is that Bluewater Park has essentially about $250,000 or $200,000 of works over the next 5 years, and your reserve balance only has $164,000 in it as of the end of 2019. I mean, there will be other contributions, but contributions are nominal throughout the 5 years, which I haven't taken into consideration.
2019 or 2020?
This is the end of 2019. Projected reserve balance is about 160.
And is that, excuse me, can I ask a question on behalf of Bluewater? Is that including the,
Common stuff?
yeah,
Sorry.
the master plan?
This is basically essentially, the 149 includes, it should be 99.3, that includes the master plan.
Yeah.
So essentially it's.
That could change.
That could change,
Yeah.
exactly. All this slide is doing is highlighting that your reserve balances are inadequate to meet the required capital needs. So we need to increase the contribution to reserves, which is leading into my next slide, which is based on, I'm gonna go through the operating budget first. So your operating budget, which is in front of you, essentially anticipates an increase of $20,000 in user fees revenue, most of which will go towards contribution to the capital reserve, or almost all of it will go, with the exception of $5,000. We're also increasing the provision for water transferred over from King Edward Bay to the Bluewater System Park to represent what the actual cost is. There's a $10,000 provision in the budget. We're increasing that provision to $5,000. So moving over to this slide, what does the 20,000 budget increase mean? Well, in terms of, I've just provided, we've got 147 connected properties and 6 unconnected properties. Your current rate, flat rate is $650 a meter. For unconnected properties, $420. We had taken a look at a demand-based rate structure as well. However, given we're doing a master study, we thought it would be premature to go in and introduce something when a master study might recommend something else. So all I've done is applied the proposed rate increase to the flat rate for water. So that would see the current rate per connection going up from $650 to $790, and the unconnected rate going from $423 to $500, in order for the revenue to increase by $20,000, which would increase that much of an annual contribution to your reserves. So the recommendation is for proposed rates to go from $650 to $790 to council in the upcoming budget. if you have any comments, I'd appreciate them and we can capture those.
Yeah, and which we discussed earlier, there might be some repeat line items that we possibly have spent in the 79.5 last year that Glenn and Patrick are gonna look at, just to make sure where that final operation budget number lands, and then potentially we still hit this 790 target and just put more in the capital reserve. As I'm seeing right now, you're looking almost another $100 per household going into capital reserve, so that's going up towards $200 a year for capital reserves, which, based on long-term planning, still isn't adequate.
That's correct.
So we need to continue to think about this more.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't have an issue with this. I don't know what Nick has to say when he saw these numbers.
No, I think it makes sense to me. There'll obviously be people in the community who'll be really upset about this.
Yeah.
But I don't have to come and discuss that with them, I guess.
The other thing to highlight is there hasn't been an increase since 2016. The
Yeah.
rates have remained stable since then. So.
And I believe I was
Okay.
talking to Glenn last year, I pulled a number out of this guy of $800 starting this year, so I think I was too far off.
Raj, can I just ask a quick question, and forgive me because I don't know the history of the West Side water issues last year. You've got in there the water purchases from King Edward Bay.
Right.
Is that a precedence that's been set for connected water systems, or is this what is that?
Essentially, the water.
I don't want to poke any words.
Let's go for coffee.
Who's water?
Those two connect, there is a connection between those two water systems, so when Bluewater's demand is higher than what its system can meet,
Right.
water is transferred over from King Edward Bay, and we have a formula that's used to calculate the cost of that water.
So is that something that will be done if there are other connected systems and the same situation arises? Will that be or is this a?
I couldn't answer that without us having a water
It
master
is,
study.
it is in fact been in
But
place for
that-
5 years. And I would emphasize that the transfer payments are cost. There's no profit to King Edward Bay. In fact, some of my neighbors are concerned about the stress on our infrastructure as a result of it.
We do, sorry, the connection between Eagle Cliff and Twin Point will come into play temporarily. And we can get to that. Okay. The Eagle Cliff system.
Well, Bowen Bay is also connected, but they kind of tend to hide. They've never required our King Edward Bay water.
They've got,
Well, you were
they've
thinking
got the
trying to
block on the
suck
valve.
We might take some from you. Yeah.
So that,
We thought of running a line, service line.
now that we've gone through that, I think we can move on to the Bowen Bay capital sheet. We've gone through the shared items. Maybe we'll, are there any questions on the Bowen Bay?
I'm just going to thank you, everybody, for your time. I'm not retired, so I have to go.
And Raj,
Yes.
I'd like to just add a comment. Again, assuming you've got this information for your proposal for each
I
community.
do. Yeah.
That too would have been nice information to have had in advance of this meeting, so that we are walking into this meeting with a position that yes, we support, or no, we don't, as opposed to, here it is.
We had this.
This information I sent to you last week.
It's actually, that information is included in your operating statement, generally speaking, but not in this format.
And the connected property
All right,
information.
I don't think we have that for you.
Yeah.
Oh, for Eagle Cliff, because you, is there one?
That's the one that you wanted to
Hold on, just a second.
Well, they need to wait till we get
Yeah,
there.
It doesn't matter.
When we get to Eagle Cliff.
Okay.
Sorry, enough said.
Stick to the
Yeah,
agenda.
actually, in yours, I didn't have the rates because you guys have such a different rate structure than everybody else. But, okay, can we go through the Bowen Bay capital items? Is there any questions on, maybe what we'll do is ask if there's any questions on the specific items here.
I regret that I brought my wrong glasses. Very difficult time reading.
Do you need a pair of readers?
No, these are reading, but I'm suffering a bit today. We all know how and I'm only speaking for myself, I'm not representing the whole Bowen here because I don't even have a forum. $30,000, that's out, right? the next line item is $10,000, and what's that?
Sorry, could I just get you to restate that?
So you don't want the
30,000 is
aquifer monitoring
That was
device?
one of your prior recommendations.
Yeah,
last
yeah.
year.
So you're okay
Well-
with that?
Pardon?
You're okay with the aquifer monitoring device or not?
The $30,000 here.
That's for an aquifer monitoring device.
Yes, but isn't that for everyone?
No, that's
No, that's
specific to Bowen
specific
Bay,
to
the very
Bowen
first
Bay.
line.
Okay, so it's only $30,000. What are we getting for that? So we got 3 pumps.
Getting data on the performance of the aquifer.
I didn't think that, nobody said it was gonna be $30,000.
Okay, we're saying that now as part of the
That's
budget
a
review.
hell of a lot of money. And are you putting in, you gonna put 1 monitor or 3 monitors?
Yeah, I noticed that. It's not a
We need to obtain a formal quote, and it's a high number because we don't know exactly what's gonna be involved. It's possible that the entire pump mechanism and some, what's referred to as a down tube needs to be installed, which is very labor.
See, nobody encouraged that type of money, right? There's no, because Bluewater, didn't you have one put in?
They're just temporary, and then you're proposing 2 to go in, Patrick, for 2020, and ours is listing at 18,000. For, I think, 2?
And ours is $30,000.
Does that include having to pull the submersible pumps out to do this?
Possibly.
That in itself can get very expensive.
Why, yeah, I'd have to inquire on the,
But I mean,
our.
to replace a pump is like $7,000, right? That was the type of money. I just don't understand where these figures are. I can't support figures like that.
We've got 25,000 for a pump.
What?
We've got 25,000 for a pump.
You do?
Yeah, I think we're at
But you didn't replace the pump? And how much it costs?
Well, as you said.
Okay, let's move on and take it that there's a question about the veracity of the $30,000 number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. The next number is a $10,000 number, I believe. And that's for,
It's marked as a placeholder, so I assume that's an estimate?
marked as a placeholder.
Yeah, I mean, everything else on the list are the same items that we've already discussed for water, so there's nothing new being introduced here.
So the mainline water meters are replacement.
Yeah, the mainline water meters, are the, when you pull them out, are you putting an 8-inch pipe?
No, these meters are based on,
So we're gonna dig up the pipe, right? You're gonna dig up the pipe, put a meter in, and then replace that pipe that's been there before.
The Korea study is talking about upgrading their water meters so they can have water flow hydrant protection. And I think what Jim's saying is to replace the meter now on a small pipe, and then 2 years from now, put in the 8-inch pipe.
okay, well, it's possible that they can put in an 8-inch meter with meters.
This is why I'm having problems. The thought's not been there, you know? I don't care for any of the budgets here.
Well, I think where we're not on the same page in terms of process. Right now, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of work to articulate the details of each of these activities. This is the budget planning process where we do our best to identify the activities that are required to allow us to move forward. We do our best to suggest
I'm not
budgetary
saying you're
bad guys, right? No, but I think we're missing the hope that we need to have fundamental buy-in on the direction that we're going before we can get in.
I'm just saying there's $65,000, right? Don't care about the drop, right? But that's 5% of putting in a proper system. And, you know, that's just money being wasted, I think. So I'm personally I'm against the law. That's my view.
Okay. The only other item here is it's just a placeholder, it's the provision of, for replacement of equipment and water main break repairs. If they
Yeah,
happen
that-
during the year, if they happen, we've got.
Yeah,
a
that's
provision to
all
address
right,
them.
leave that.
Okay. So apart from that, I'm going to move on to your, essentially based on what's in the 2020 plan, we've got 66,800 provision, additional $66,000 needs to be spent in 2024 based on the projects that were identified. And again, it's highlighting that over the next 5 years, your capital needs are about $133,000. At the end of 2019, your projected reserve balances are at 102. Again, it's just highlighting your that reserve balances are light. We need to increase contributions. We
I don't
have to
mind,
take into
I don't mind
consideration
increasing the contribution.
sustainability.
Build up the.
Surely, given the size of your budget, I'm only recommending a $6,100 increase this year in your flat, in revenue, which if applied to your 60 connected properties, it would take your current rate from $705 a year to $805.
Yeah, and there's one other problem with your whole budget here. When you go spend 2/3 of the capital, our capital fund, and you maintain that we're still having this income from our reserve, that's wrong.
Oh, the investment revenue?
No, I mean,
Well,
this is not very good stuff.
well, essentially, you would still earn that revenue because some of those items are placeholders and that money hasn't been spent during the year, so it is sitting in the account. And we're talking about $1,000 here.
I know.
So, let's just kind of keep it in context if we can.
So the principle, I think, is that if it's investment money on surplus funds, it should stay in surplus and not be used for operations. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I'm saying, if we spent 2/3 of the capital, that's what they were saying we wanted to spend in
Got it. Okay.
2020,
But it
right?
wouldn't be spent at the beginning of the year, it would be,
But it was gone by the end of the year, and you're carrying it forward for the next few years. It's nickels and dimes, but it's not good accounting practices.
yeah. Essentially, should we go to the Eagle Cliff capital items?
Sorry?
Then can I maybe get you to walk them to the
Is it
front and then?
wants to
Yeah,
he's gonna
You've gone through the shared notes.
I can comment on them if you want, right off the bat. The Eagle Cliff Reservoir staff gauge, we support absolutely replacement. The GIS, we now understand, the updated flow works, we understand. The new main line and water meters, we support that in principle, but question the dollar value, understanding it's only an estimate. The business case, we support the business case on the electronic meter idea. Would like to see what it provides. The master plan, we've already discussed ad nauseum. We don't support it, just to be black and white. Provision of replacement of equipment, water main breaks, et cetera, the $10,000, yes, understand, need it, and fear that might be not enough, that's where we're going. The Eagle Cliff LAS, I don't know what LAS stands for.
Local area service.
Oh, there you go. The main water line replacement has been canceled. We'd like to know the rationale for the cancellation of that.
You're going in the opposite direction.
Well, the biggest priority that we need to deal with is the reservoir.
Understood.
I don't know, I mean,
What we'd like to see with this, just as a comment, of course, we still have our 3-inch line coming down from the reservoir,
yeah.
which we do not believe has been pressure tested the second time. I know it was scheduled, but we
It
didn't.
has.
It has?
So we did pressure test the line 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
It's, doesn't show a major leak in the line, which leads us back to the reservoir.
Okay, good.
And really, you're not gonna find the leak in the reservoir, you need to line the reservoir. drained.
Okay,
Um,
so before we go to that, because that'll be our next one,
Yeah,
we would rather have, because a 3-inch line is still a limiting factor,
yeah,
we would like to have that still as a place marker, not canceled outright, but moved to possibly an outward year with the idea of possible replacement with a target, maybe 8-inch line,
yeah.
et cetera. So,
It should be in there, I don't know.
yeah, that, we questioned why it was canceled entirely. We don't like the wording of the reservoir berm replacement, because it says partial lining.
I think it has to be a complete lining.
Absolutely. So it's the wording in that that needs to be changed, so that it is a complete lining.
Yeah,
I've sent you the four
yeah,
Is the 100
four price quote ranges.
probably not.
There's four price quote ranges between $65,000 and $140,000 was the range
Yeah,
for the four options. We don't know which is the best. We'd be looking
yeah,
for a suggestion on that, A. And B, if we're going to implement that work, there's a couple things that we'd probably add to the scope, and that would be increasing the north side volume of the reservoir, again, to increase capacity. And also, on the south side, there is a sunken rock island that if we're going to line it, that rock island is going to be in the way, so it needs to be blasted out. So that should be part of the scope of the work. And what else do I have to say about that?
How big is this reservoir?
It's about 5,400 square meters on the surface.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you seen it, Patrick?
I have, yeah, I've been up there a few times. It's,
Bluewater smaller?
yes, it's bigger than the Bluewater.
Yeah, we're not using ours.
So is that related to the Eagle Cliff Water Service, Reservoir Pothole Survey has already been done, so
Yeah.
that's not a capital.
So the other thing is, in order to do the work, we need to have a supply. We've looked at the pressure and flows at the connection between the Eagle Cliff and Hood Point system. It is feasible to supply most of the properties in Eagle Cliff from Hood Point temporarily. There's a few where you'd have to bring in a tank to supply temporarily because they're too high. That's going to have to be coordinated between the two water systems.
Would the wells not be enough to temporarily service them?
No.
You can't pump it up in the,
I thought the wells were enough to meet the average daily demand, but not necessarily the peak demand.
My understanding from our utilities crew is that they're not enough, that we need additional supply from the Hood Point system.
Yeah.
And we're going to need to bring part of the scope will be a temporary tank for the homes that aren't.
Do we know
we're not able to supply.
how many homes are above that water pressure line?
It's half a dozen, something like that.
Okay. Okay.
Do you have a time when you're anticipating
The reservoir,
winter being better than summer?
Yeah.
July and August isn't a good time.
it'll have to be, I think.
I'll touch on that.
Yeah.
The reservoir has to be empty at the point at which the lining is installed. Best option on that is probably mid-August. Normal consumption will draw it down, and then we can pump it balance the way, and then we're going to hold on until the weather in the fall is able to refill.
so that's real dry down.
Yeah, that's
So
the,
it's the worst time in terms of supply and sharing water, but we have to,
Understood. Yeah.
it's going to require further investigation as to what the needs are going to be from the Hood Point system and
We can do
that we
that.
can accommodate that.
At a separate meeting, we can,
we'll talk.
we'll work.
Yeah.
We wouldn't
We'll
need
talk.
very much water from Wood Point because our wells.
Wells deliver.
We'll see when we hear the number, David. We don't know what very much is.
Yeah, we would like to cooperate is what
We will
our
cooperate.
message is.
Yeah.
We're good neighbors.
So that said, all of that said, 100,000 we do not believe is enough there.
No, I
It
don't
needs to
either.
probably be 200.
That's closer.
a WAG,
I would agree.
a wild ass guess.
That means it's 250.
Throw these numbers around pretty easy.
So is it safe to say then, with the investment being proposed for the open reservoir, that this is an acceptable source for us moving forward?
That's the assumption, yeah. But, you're getting at whether maybe we should be looking at abandoning the
It's
reservoir.
not
putting
my
it in.
preference. I'm asking if that is inevitable.
Let us do a master plan over there.
Because you got
An
Bluewater.
individual water
I
plan.
mean, this
Not
is
a
one of
master,
the
so I wouldn't
questions
take
that
that.
you get at.
So all your water and Eagle Cliff
No, but
surface
that's for
water,
the Eagle Cliff.
We have backup wells.
We have
Back-
two,
back-
two backup wells.
but they're not enough to service.
There's other questions there.
Are you fully built out? Are you fully built out?
No,
Have another
we
well?
have, I think we have theoretical capacity for another 35 households roughly. I think the system was designed at 140.
140.
And we're at 108, was it?
Yes.
109, something like that, so.
But there's possible ability to increase the capacity of the reservoir, is that correct?
That's what I'm asking.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's why I said as part of the scope, we would like to have this included.
Yeah.
We're gonna have equipment up there and all of it, it's a case of just pushing more dirt and whatnot out of the way, so giddy up.
The dam originally on the north side is very shallow because they ran into gravel there, and they're afraid that if they went any deeper, it would drain the reservoir. So there's a
Is that true
capacity
with the
there
liner?
that's going to be lined to probably double the capacity of our reservoir. And we're over 2 million gallons now. And and it wouldn't cost much more to line it a little deeper.
Yeah. So,
How much does your reservoir drop in the summer?
pardon, in a normal summer or last summer?
Last summer.
Last summer, we almost went dry. But that has never happened in 35 years. There's been a number of,
It never filled up last winter.
It's full now.
It's full now.
Okay.
well, it's full and dropping. Last item, the Eagle Cliff Water Treatment Investigation and Preliminary Design vis-a-vis filtration. While we support that in principle, it is not a priority for us right now. We'd like to kick that one down the road a few years.
Just the background on that, we do
That's true.
support doing that, and that's basically was a warning call from the province based on turbidity levels from last year. Yes, if we can argue that it's not necessary, we do support trying to take it down.
And I think if we're making changes to the reservoir as we're discussing, that may affect the turbidity.
Right.
And so, okay, that's it. For capital.
So generally speaking, so projects we went through, just a high-level picture over the next 5 years, based on everything that's in here, capital needs are about 283,000, your capital reserve projected balance is about 275, so again,
With due respect, that slide is meaningless relative
But-
to the discussion of the day.
yeah. But the numbers do change, it just gives relativity, I mean, some things come out, other things come in, so we're still relatively in that
Understood.
ballpark, so that's the only point I'm trying to make there.
Okay.
That being said, your reserves are light, rates need to go up in all systems, so basically, I'm proposing a 29,800 increase in your revenues. Primarily in Eagle Cliff, there was you guys also have a parcel tax for capital.
Correct.
But I believe your operating rates were lower, so your parcel tax was actually in past years going to cover some of your operating costs. So this is addressing your operating revenue so that the parcel tax that you collect for capital will continue going into capital in the budget.
So as an aside, Raj,
Yes.
recognize what you're trying to do there. We also did a similar kind of exercise
Yeah.
where we wanted to be a little bit more punitive on the increased consumption.
Right.
So we took basically the first digit and turned it into a $600 number, the second digit being 700, 800, 1,000, 1,200, and then $1,400.
Okay.
And when we took the consumption chart that you provided during our last LAC, divided that by households, that gives us, that covers the shortfall. It gives us $77,000 roughly.
Okay.
Our target is about 75, so that does it. The other comment about that is, again, if we look at our 2018 budget and actual numbers on the sheet, there are significant under expenditures, but yet the higher expenditure has been carried forward, which is why we suggested the 2019 actuals to date would be helpful.
Okay.
Because frankly, we don't know that the expenses identified or forecast are a one-time situation or an ongoing. You'll notice in 2018,
Yeah.
we were able to deposit our near $35,000 into the capital reserve.
Because your expenditures were lower. I got that exactly. And we'll have to take a deeper look into whether those are representative of your, I've assumed that your budget numbers are representative of your ongoing needs and you've got efficiencies, or money just didn't get spent in 2018. But as a credit to you guys, at least that money goes into your capital reserve if it's
over and above.
If it's over and above,
But
exactly.
the flip side is, it can't go the other way.
That's, oh, for sure, and we're lucky it happened, yeah. In the last couple of years, it hasn't done that.
Well, I thought it did last year, and we kind of screamed bloody murder, because it can't. That's not part of the agreement, that's not part of the bylaw.
Yes.
So that said, again, it comes down to, we're being asked to make a budgetary recommendation on a very narrow window of information here, and that's not entirely helpful. If you like, just from the budgetary number, I can give you the numbers that we ran through.
I'd like that, yeah, if you could email those to me, I will take them into.
But again, we're trying to meet a demand that's identified here that we don't know whether it's a truthful demand.
Well, I believe that essential, okay. So what you were,
We're saying we have a $30,000 shortfall.
Yeah.
But if we look at 2018, that shortfall that does not exist.
Oh, that-
What changed between 2018, 2019, and 2020 that suddenly we've got a $30,000 shortfall?
the shortfall is in your budgeted numbers, essentially, based on the budgeted expenditures. Your revenues are not,
But we don't know that those
Yeah.
budgeted numbers are the actuals.
Yeah. Yeah, with the 2018.
yeah. I mean, I've got 2018 there, I'd have to take a look at yours. I'll have a look at that. As well, but I've just based, I've made the assumption on the last few budget that that's your ongoing need, that 2018 was a
Well,
lower year, but we can
except
take a look at a few years actual.
if we look at the previous years, we had been building our capital reserve
Yeah,
as planned, as forecast, as required, which is how we got the balance that we have.
yeah.
But suddenly in the budget slash forecasts, we are showing a significant deficit. We don't know why. I'll stop. Eagle Cliff is done.
Your deficit,
What goes into professional and contract services? I mean, is it just outside consultants?
Professional and contract services would be, it would be essentially outside
So
consultants.
the time that Glenn spent in 2019 looking
In charge there,
at
yeah.
all the problems with the with the berm and the reservoir would have been reflected, will be in the actuals for 2019 if we saw them.
Yeah.
And where did I'm assuming these guys have a surface water license, so where is that? Those license fees, are they in legal audit?
Legal audit and insurance.
So and license fees, okay.
Okay. Thanks. I will have a look at those items and into good point. In terms of good point, capital items, we've got,
Excuse me, Rob, are you changing the screen, or should we just look at this here?
I don't know.
I don't-
Let's take a look at
It's
our.
probably easier to look at our,
Yeah, your numbers for capital, yeah, the individual items for good points are
yeah, well, what,
in the schedule.
yeah, okay, but just maybe before to do a bit of a summary of how this thing's working, I'm getting confused on, and I think we should, it's always been an issue, but I think we should try to address it, is that the user fees should simply be for what the actual operating of the system costs, so that people understand that, and the parcel tax should be for what future infrastructure is gonna, so people in the system can understand. And I appreciate if we collected a few more $1,000, it's not a problem to transfer it, but we're getting, we've gotten off, because we haven't changed our rate since 2014 at $780, and we were somehow putting extra money or whatever into capital, but it was supposed to be, on my understanding, based on the parcel tax. And I guess these actual 2018 are a little confusing, because if we just add up expenses, it's $55,708, which would only mean a $594 user fee, which is why we talk
Are you following that?
on the expense, well, just strictly
Well,
the expenses in
Yeah.
2018.
Based on 2018, I can see your supply and services expenses are about 16,000, but they could be lower than what you're.
Well, no, sorry, Rod, just don't worry about what they are. If we just take the whole group from staff compensation to professional development,
Right,
that's 55,708. What I'm looking at is we jump forward, and all the next years have been pretty much the same for some of the budget, the actual, but we're saying that those are now gonna be $88,500. It's sort of a major jump, which there may be some explanation for, but if that's really what the cost is, we were only collecting like 73,000 before, so now if our expenses are supposed to jump to around 89,000, yes, we need to collect $940 in user fees that are strictly for operating and maintaining the system.
right.
And I guess there's one question, I heard a number of 93 for connections, but all our previous budget was 94, that's one connection. Anyway, just, I don't understand why the expense thing is jumping even over and above the 73.
So you're not understanding the 89,000 related to the 55,000?
Yeah,
Is what you're saying, so you're saying the same thing that Eagle Cliff was saying, that your
Yeah.
actual expenses are 55. And,
I don't know whether that was right.
pardon?
I don't know whether that
Yeah.
was right.
Well, so, I mean, your 2018 expenses are 55, and again, I mean, I've just based this on, again, your 2020 budget is just your 2019 budget inflated. I haven't made adjustments to go back to your actuals to 2018, because it could have been a lower than required year. I mean, if you didn't, on an ongoing, so basically, the assumption here is on an ongoing basis, the budget is reflecting your costs on an ongoing basis, and 2018 was a favorable year in terms of expenditures in comparison to budget, so the difference would have gone
Into
your
the
reserves.
reserve, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
if I may, just under professional and contract services,
Yes,
we just heard that that was third party, Glenn or others
Yeah.
helping us. That isn't a continuing cost, is it? It shouldn't be.
Oh, it's a budget
well, it's a
provision.
budget provision, so essentially, if you needed to use a third-party services, you've got the budget there. If you don't have the budget
Okay.
there, then our engineer has no,
Room.
basically funding
Yes,
or room
okay.
to engage a professional consultant
And then-
for things that may come up on an
Fair enough.
ongoing basis.
Under legal audit and insurance, we once put in $7,500, which we never spent, for legal in regard to our licenses, which pushed it from 5373 to 13,1. I've just spoken to Allison, I think that 75
Yeah, I'll have,
should come out.
We need
So-
to reduce that, we need a lot of.
Yeah, Kirsten originally said, just leave it in, and if you don't use it,
Okay.
it'll come out, but I guess with the transitions, it's
It
never.
didn't come out,
Never
because you just picked up the
come
carry
out.
forward numbers for it.
But at the end of the day, it goes to your reserves.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we can adjust that, and we can adjust the contribution to your reserve. I hear what you're saying, and that provision should reflect in reality what the ongoing cost is. So I wasn't aware that $7,500 had been added to that in 1 year prior to my arriving. So I have just assumed that that is an ongoing need, but if we're gonna adjust it, yeah, we move it down, and we could probably move.
But
you
as
have
an
additional
aside,
contribution to your reserves, yeah.
I appreciate you understand, but as an
Yeah.
aside to all of that, that's
Yeah.
why I've always contended, it's never been figured that it can be done, is for the purpose of our budget meeting with the advisory committee,
Mhm.
these numbers should be put on a spreadsheet and broken down as to how they get to the aggregate. Like, once you give it to the neighborhood meeting or whatever, they don't need to see all they need to know is they've been reviewed. But when you start combining things, and it's always been like, where the insurance, legal and audit insurance, well, they're all different. Legal bill 1 year is one thing, insurance for property, for, different categories is all lumped in, and audit, the audit for the state.
And the licenses.
Yeah, well, and everything should be in a meeting where we look through is broken out and then consolidated, because it just means we have no way of tracking year to year. And all we want to know is when somebody says, oh, it cost me $900 for the year, they understand that it's a reasonable based on the actual expenses, not we just throw out a number because we might need more, And then the capital thing, that's the next issue, which we agree based on what I think Glenn said, like 1% of our system should be allocated for infrastructure replacement approximately.
That's for new, yeah, for brand new systems. If you're behind, then.
Well, okay, but like if our system was 4.8 million, we do, and the parcel tax here is also an issue which seems to not be tracking quite accurately, but it may be again based on connections of unconnected. We have a parcel tax of 300 for connected, 100 for unconnected, or 150. And we've been working on the basis of 94 lots connected and 16 unconnected. And I get that we should be around 30,600, and I don't know, we're somehow, that's an old number, 29,100, but regardless. What we're proposing is that we should increase our parcel tax on the connected to $400, and 200 on the unconnected. And that would give us about $41,000 on a regular.
So the money going into reserves is coming from the parcel tax,
And
not
people
from-
understand that's
And
where it's
that's
going.
another thing I wasn't clear on, because when I take a look at your parcel tax bylaw, it doesn't specify what it's for or whether it should be going to reserves. All it says is a parcel tax will be applied on a property.
Oh, no, but I thought there's a municipal bylaw that says reserves are supposed to go to, or parcel taxes.
No.
I've got a parcel tax.
No,
bylaw.
Eagle Cliff's parcel tax specifies that it should be going to pay debt, or it should be going to their capital infrastructure. The Hood Point parcel tax bylaw does not specify what it's for.
Doesn't?
It does not.
Well, we'd like it to.
But, well, it probably should, if that's what it's meant for. I didn't have the background on why that parcel tax was established. It just, and I don't understand why you would have a separate parcel, well, if it's for capital, fine, but it's kind of just confuses things if you have a separate parcel tax for capital and user rates for something else. I would just assume you would have one rate, and it would actually.
Our parties, the people in our specified area really appreciate the breakout of what the user is and what we're going towards capital.
But if it's specified for capital renewal and replacement, we probably should amend the bylaw to reflect it to say that.
I assumed that that's what it was.
Okay.
It could be new capital and capital.
Yeah, it just doesn't say anything. All it says, a parcel tax will be of X dollars will be applied.
And I guess that's what we assumed it was for, but anyway, if we need to change that, but we're not doing that today, fine, we can do that at another time, but at this point, I guess we just wait till we have to do a bylaw to change.
Yeah.
Well, we need to
So that's
see
why, actually in my, like, in terms of, in my proposal, well, in terms of recommending rates, because I didn't understand what the parcel tax was for, I didn't recommend an increase in the parcel tax, but if it is for capital, I will go back and revisit that, so that we're, essentially what you guys have is current rate of $780 per connected parcel, and it's going up by about, almost,
Yeah, it's a 20%.
$170, so
fairly-
you're saying that that should be applied to the parcel tax rather than to the
Yeah,
user rate.
we're
And
happy.
I'm out, yeah, I can revise that.
And
And no graduated.
just for clarity, we have 94 connected properties and 16 unconnected properties.
Yeah.
The unconnected here refers only to the fact that there is no unconnected rate.
Well, it just means there's no meter,
Yeah, well,
they're not, the law doesn't,
They're not using water.
No,
they're
they're
not
not
using water, they don't have a
water.
meter.
And your reason for wanting to have the parcel tax for the improvements is because
They're gonna
connected and
benefit.
unconnected all benefit.
All benefit.
Whereas, and that's why, and the user rate is only for the people that are actually using the water.
Yeah.
So that's.
That's all the
Okay.
logic we've been.
Yeah,
That's the logic they've been following.
Okay,
So what we were recommending
That's
was a
called
parcel
good
tax of $400,
Yeah.
not $3.
They're
And
connected.
that are connected, and 200 for the unconnected, which changes that 15,700 at the top to
The parcel
40,800.
tax is already 300.
Yeah, for
Alright,
connected
yeah.
water.
Oh, that's only for connected.
That's right,
Yeah.
we always said that.
so what you, okay, so, sorry, you changed your top number to what?
40,800. Well,
The increase in revenue?
No, not
No,
revenue,
that's
no,
it.
no, we're confusing them again. It's the
The
parcel
increase in the
tax,
parcel
for
tax, yeah.
capital, parcel
Yeah.
tax.
Okay, I see what you're saying, I got you, I got you.
And the increase that
No.
we're going to put in the current,
Yeah, I can,
in the
yeah.
operating would get allocated in the parcel.
Well, if there's an excess, but if right now, if our expenses are 89,000, that user fee is just gonna cover expenses, there's not gonna be
But
any
your
left
expenses are
over.
only budgeted to be 55,000.
No, they're not, that's what we've been
That was
saying.
the 2018
That was
actual.
2018, we're now looking at 2020 of
It's
88,000.
Oh, I
88,000.
thought you said that out
No,
of.
No, this is
Add
50,
it up.
this is 55,
Yeah.
and that's 88. That's why, sorry, just for real clarity.
89,000 is sort of
If
the number.
you add up expenses from, I'm on the far left column, 29,791, all the way down to $152. That entire column adds up to 55,708. If you add the same column in budget 2020, that column adds up to 88,500.
60-some-odd% increase.
Yeah, I'll have to have a further, what I'll have to do is have a further look into
Okay,
essentially your
that's fine.
ongoing expenditures there. Right now, my assumption is your operating expenditures are 88,500.
User fee
So-
would be 900.
That's
So your
budget.
user fees to fund that should be 88,500.
$950, $40.
So if there is a slight difference that
I know the $7,500 will
Yeah.
come out,
Okay.
the other things,
Well,
so whatever it adds, we're fine with it.
Okay,
But you want an increase in the parcel tax.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got our
yeah,
parcel tax.
I've got your,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Can I ask one more silly question?
A silly question, will I ask it?
The insurance, well, there are no questions, or silly questions. The insurance is actually, that's not an allocated based on connection with the property insurance. That would be the actual property insurance bill for that particular system. Because property insurance is
No.
done on so many cents a dollar, $1,000 worth of property value, replacement value. So is that the actual, it's not just all the system's property insurance bill divided by connection?
It's not the property insurance
No,
bill,
it's not.
divided by connection, it would probably, I believe Shale used to make an allocation of the individual
Yeah.
insurances of,
For the individual property.
individual properties and allocate them that way.
It's not us covering like community insurance on automobiles. and things like that.
No, it's not liability insurance, it's property insurance.
Yeah, but they're all liability.
But we built a dam, a bridge, a registered dam, that's being insured.
Oh, yes.
I don't have, I'm just, I'm,
The assets. Yeah, well, I thought
That's
that's what
our
we asked.
primary asset.
Yeah, it should be insured, so.
Well, it's all part of our, if they did that
That's why
study,
you break
that's,
Part of the municipal,
that study of infrastructure
Yeah.
should have shown it as part of our cost of the 4.8 million. So it should be.
yeah.
If that's what, I don't know what you.
Those are also 2015 numbers, and they have to be reviewed.
Yeah, okay.
And the other question is the asset management plan costs,
Pardon?
or the asset management plan?
The asset management plan costs have not been allocated to utilities.
They had been in the past.
Yeah. They should be, but they haven't been.
Well, you can say they got spent.
Okay.
Okay,
Point taken, we'll take a look at those items. And then King
well,
Edward.
sorry, Roger, I thought, just
Oh.
one comment maybe on this page with the water system master plan, which we don't agree with, but just trying to clarify, because it's in this year's budget, is there's a provision replacement water leak repair, and one of the well pumps may be overpowered. Well, we don't have a well. I'm trying to think what
Well,
that,
provision replacement.
That
of
wording
equipment
was,
hardware.
that was throughout, I think. Yeah.
okay, so there's
Some of these things have been
$10,000.
repeated on
Yeah.
each system.
I think that's meant to be a contingency.
So, yeah, so
We
it's
don't
a,
have a well.
So change, no, it will change the wordings.
Yeah,
I
that-
have to say that.
Yeah, the copy over of that seems correct.
Okay,
That's incorrect, okay.
But it's gonna be changed to a $10,000 repair contingency.
No, that's
It's a
up
repair
above.
yeah, but that's what I wondered, up
Yeah.
above, then it says here, item
my
3.
apologies, I copied the same description
Yes,
to all
we
of the
saw
water
that.
districts,
Yeah.
so that I would have, so there would be a placeholder in case.
So that's the
repairs
number
were
3, the
required.
new mainline meters replacement is $10,000.
So what's the new mainline and water
Yeah,
meters
no, I just-
replacements? Is that, do they have mainline water meters that need replacement, or do they even have mainline water meters in Hood Point?
Oh, yeah, fine. Yeah, no, it's East Coast.
They don't know, she's asking a question here to a good point.
What's that?
Well, the new mainline and water meters replacement, which I think, let's see what you were just asking. Does Hood Point have mainline water meters in various places around the system? Or do you just
both.
have the one that comes out of the water tank?
No, we
No,
all
no, no, no,
have
we all have
individual meters.
No, like on your main line, to identify what leg, if there was a leak, to identify what
No,
leg.
no, we don't, we have one flow meter out of the treatment plant, as I understand it, which monitors the flow. If it all goes up in one day, they assume there's a leak, I guess.
And then we will have a adjoining meter
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah, and I think that was the issue that we don't have.
I mean, this is a good thing to do. This is one of the outcomes of Bluewater, right? Trying to isolate where the leak was.
Yeah.
And this is a really good thing to do. Let's just do it the right way.
Okay, we're all
Okay,
fine.
okay.
Thank you.
Good, thanks for,
Well, you're fine until you're finished, not that
Yeah.
you're fine with all the numbers.
No, we're fine with the numbers.
fine where we are. Just- Okay.
Okay, moving on to King Edward Day.
Okay,
Yeah, in terms
Brian
of-
offers his apologies, he had to catch the 1 o'clock ferry. On the capital, my first question is, we have pump replacement of 25,000, and then we have the provision with regard to wells and mains and so on. That strikes me as being a duplicate right there. If you've already decided one pump needs to be replaced, and we need to find out why that pump needs to be replaced. It's way too early, in my view, to be replacing that. And of course, we're concerned that it requires replacement because of the stress placed on a system that was designed for under 50 connections, providing 200. So, and then the other thing, the $10,000 placeholder, I mean, it's quite possible that the capital expenditures for King Edward Bay this year will be $700 for a couple of tires on the truck.
So what'll
So
happen if,
I think that duplication needs to be taken out.
it's actually not taking that funding out, it is just a placeholder, so if there is a capital requirement.
But that's,
we're-
yeah.
But we're talking about the amounts that are actually going to be spent. So that's,
And 20, can I go back to this one thing here? Where do you get this figure, $25,000 for pump replacement? We drilled wells, last well we drilled was under $25,000, drill and everything. Pump.
Well, that would happen today. basically about 30,000 just to drill.
Okay, drill,
So you're talking about replacing the pump that's working, but it's overpowered, is that why?
I think the word overpowered is the wrong word.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Okay.
So the pipe, this is part of an outcome of the investigation
Mhm.
with the hydrogeologist of the King Edward Bay and Bluewater system. They reassessed how each of the pumps are performing. The telemetry is suggesting that the pump is overpowered for what the well is actually able to put out. So right now, right now, the pump is cycling far too fast and putting far too much strain on the system, and the optimum performance would actually be to.
But surely it's cycling because of the amount of water it has to pump to serve the needs of the users.
Well, absolutely.
Can it not be put on a much less frequent cycle and therefore save the life of the pump? That's just the point I want to make. I mean, maybe nobody knows for sure, but I can certainly tell you what people in my neighborhood are thinking, and that's what I'm doing. Okay?
The exercise is to reestablish, and the word investigate, the telemetry is suggesting there's a problem and there's a better.
Well, I look forward to the conclusive results then, when you have them.
I question, maybe that's an engineering terminology, but the term overpowered is, what we're really saying is the pump cycling too long. Isn't that what you're saying?
Pumps
In
low
essence,
rate.
yes, but the terminology is that the pump is overpowering the well.
Anyway.
But guys, we have limited
We're getting
time.
into
Let's-
Yeah, you get my
let's-
point, and Glenn will respond. The other thing that concerns me, as you know, we presented a statistical analysis, thank you, Dr. Donald Heth, as to the usage of water by King Edward Bay and Bluewater, and discovered in the process that the metering was inaccurate, to put it kindly. In fact, something approaching 86% of the water that was coming out of the King Edward Bay wells was going to Bluewater. And so this $15,000 number in the operating budget makes no sense at all. It should be around about $25,000 or $26,000, subject to what happened in 2019, when the metering became more accurate. Maybe it shouldn't be that high, but it strikes me that if we're looking at, one hopes, a $21,000 contribution to the capital reserve, if there's $25,000 or $26,000 coming in from Bluewater, that makes a huge difference to the way that the math works. So we need those actual numbers from 2019 to see what happened, and insofar as they can be distinguished from prior to the installation of the, because I take it that the more accurate meter was put in 2019, is that the timing of it? It has been put in, hasn't it?
There is a new meter, yes.
Yeah. So it would be nice to know when that was put in and what the differences were. So this number is just, I don't think, supportable based on what we know so far, but it may be that there would be other information available. And obviously, if that number changes, then the increase, which, my goodness, you're going to have people with pitchforks and firebrands in the city council if it goes from 700 to 1,161. Maybe that increase is not supported. I would suggest a political solution as opposed to a water utility solution, and that is that the King Edward Bay annual fee be set the same as Bluewater at $7.90. So I've cleared my throat. And I hope you get my points.
Can you really succeed without you falling down?
Are you offering me water?
There'll be a
So
lot of those.
Oh, okay, well, I got you down to 850 anyway, by my, why did you do 790? I mean,
Yeah.
one of my problems is that I know all my neighbors, they see me as a kind of a constituency representative, and so they'll show up at my door, and they want explanations that I'm not always given sufficient information to provide.
I think he makes a valid point with that interconnection, that the rate should be the same.
Well, it makes it, well, we're headed towards uniformity of rates anyway. I think that would be a laudable goal, island-wide uniformity, based on consumption. I saw wording to that effect. Anyway.
Yeah, it's a little bit lower than what was in the handout that was sent to you, because I didn't have the right number of connections, or I had a lower number of connections for that calculation that I had.
Okay, well, why don't you take another $60 off it? We have 2 more people coming online who've just started building. By the way, both of them are incorporating rain harvesting and storage facilities in their homes, which is wonderful.
So just a curiosity, there's no unconnected rate for some of the systems, and some of the systems have an unconnected rate. So because King Edward Bay is growing out, and there is benefit to all the people that bought those lots of having a water system, why aren't they charged a sort of a flat fee just for the fact that they can hook up to a water system? Like $200 a lot or something, and then.
Well, that's what we do with the parcel tax.
Yeah, well, you
Not
guys.
with the,
I'm not sure I understood what your
But,
point
King Edward
was.
Bay, the unconnected lots aren't paying anything.
No, they're paying
They're paying
$500.
500, well, they're paying 473 right now.
Okay,
After
okay,
purchase.
well, that's where I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they
Yeah.
are paying that.
They are.
So there's
paying-
14
okay.
unconnected lots, they're paying 473,
Okay.
we're recommending that go up to 500.
I concur with your suggestion about equalizing the rates between Bluewater and King Edward Bay, because we've been working very hard over the past year with all the crisis that happened to get beyond the animosity and the tension between the two communities, and I think this may escalate the tensions again. So I think from a political point of view, you should be watching out for that.
And he goes, it's less than Bowen Bay pays now.
But
Yeah, and thanks for that,
Yeah,
Rob,
take
because
that
Rob
into
has been
consideration.
fairly key to, I mean, the potential for animosity between the two neighborhoods is there. And Rob has been quite key to making sure, along with Brian, but he's not here, so no point in flattering him. I just have to thank Rob for that.
It's part of the whole community building of the west side too. Like it goes beyond even the water systems building. Community get-together, barbecues, that kind of thing. We want to build on that further, based on this crisis waking us up that we need to do more as a community on the west side. So let's keep that momentum going. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, by the way, for the meeting as a whole. I don't think we ever did this before, so.
Can I? It's kind of a little-
Can I just get through the
Oh,
Tunstall
sure.
Bay and then maybe save your comments to the end? Thank you. So, going to the Tunstall Bay capital listing here. And essentially, maybe I'll let you walk us through those as well, Glenn.
Sure. Well, the only unique item we haven't talked about was the storage tank that was requested last year by the LAC. So we've put that one in a two-stage process of first figuring out how it's to be done, and then a budgetary number for implementation in 2021. So whatever comments you folks have.
As long as it gets in the ground, we'll be happy.
Okay.
And will we be saving the old tank for backup?
Yeah, I think that's part of the determination, but my understanding is that a new tank would be supplemental to. At this point,
That's what we're hoping for.
I'm definitely not of the mind that the existing one would be decommissioned.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Is any discussion being with the owners of that piece of property where our tank is?
No actions around the process have been taken at this time, so no. Citing of where the tank goes is one of the primary questions that needs to be addressed.
And your time frame?
With endorsements, I guess it's 2020 is to get on the
And install it.
2020, yeah, investigation, scoping and design, and then we have to take a look at a funding source, because Tunstall Bay does not, if the decision is made to go ahead, with putting a tank in, it has to be funded. Your reserve balances are about 263. Cost of putting the tank in is gonna be about $550,000. So you don't have the money in your reserves to replace the tank. So funding strategy will have to be worked on with the Tunstall Bay LAC to address that.
Just curious, maybe it's none of my business, but what kind of plan would you have to remain in that?
In that same position?
Same position?
Well, that's just whether or not it's an assessment, or is it going to be raising our rates even higher than the 250 was
So there's not a
proposed?
specific plan?
Not yet,
Okay.
but it was proposed many years ago, the same sort of thing, and it was rejected straight out because it was just a mail-out. I mean, I've talked about it with a few of my neighbors, and they're willing to go around and actually talk to people, everybody in
And
the
sell it.
neighborhood, and sell it. Either way, whatever the proposal is, because we need it.
Cool. Thank you.
I've
Okay,
got a
so-
question regarding the proposed operating budget. These numbers, and I look at it and I see, and I'm comparing it, we have 130 units, Bluewater is 147. And yet you look at, let's say, safety. Bluewater, a larger district, is paying 300 per year. Proposal here, and it seems in 2018, we had an actual of 225. We're now up to 500. Where are these numbers coming from? Because they're all over the, like for instance, Bluewater, which of course is a little bit larger, but let's compare them. Is where for instance, rent utilities, we're 6,600, they're 4,100. Legal, 3,000, they're 1,800. It seems to me that if there's more units on, they would be higher, and that makes sense. For instance, staff compensation, we're at 47, and they're at 50,000, so it makes sense. But in these other areas where you're going down, like, for instance, what it even means, a safety program, they're at 300, we're at 500. As I say, legal, I look at the actuals in 2018. We don't have the actuals in 2019, so we're bluntly guessing. And I do say this meeting is incredible because I've been on the board for at least 5 or 6 years, and this is the first time we've had a meeting that is open. But I must admit, we have 7 boards, and one we don't know anything about. We don't know the numbers or even proposed numbers, which, as you know, is Cove Bay. The comment made that West Side maybe should be in the future be all one, be it Bowen Bay, be it Tunstall Bay, be it Bluewater. I would agree with that. But it's
if I
these
can
numbers,
address
where they're
something.
coming from, Raj?
So your budgeted numbers for 2020, which is what we're talking about, are
Yes.
based on your budget for 2019 and 18. So in terms of what you were talking about, I mean, we're talking small dollars here. You're comparing $231 to, and let me finish, please. You're comparing $231 to $500, or you're comparing $2,500 to $3,000. You're talking about $500 difference here.
Where are they
So
coming from?
relatively, in terms of coming from, they've been based on past experience. In terms of the actual costs, it's a combination of direct costs that are incurred by Tunstall Bay as a result of Tunstall Bay activities and allocations. So, for example, audit costs, for example, we incur audit costs, so a percentage of audit costs is estimated to apply to the utilities. So if, for example, 10% of our audit costs apply to utilities, we apply the 10% of total audit costs to utilities, and then they get reallocated to each utility based on the number of connections within that utility.
But I think
So-
that's what he's trying to say, their numbers are exactly the same as Bluewater's, and Bluewater has more
So there may be some direct costs in there. I mean, I can't sit here, I'm looking at this right now, I don't know which ones are direct costs and which ones have been allocated, but if you're interested in that, I can definitely go over that with you offline.
What, can I make a comment here? I perceive the budgets that we're looking at are budgets that are just being built on budgets upon budgets, right? Rather than budgets being built on prior year's history, right? We're just extending previous budgets very much.
Well, generally speaking, from what I mean, this is my second year doing this, but the trend of the actuals, I mean, with some exceptions, is probably very close here. Your budgets are not extremely far off from your actuals.
Overall, I agree with you.
On an ongoing basis. So if you wanted to take a look at your 2019 actual, for example, and let's say you happen to have a low year and you wanted to adjust your budget, you'd have to take a look at the trend of your actual for a number of years. So I've made the assumption that the budget would represent the actual trend. 2018 may have been a low year for certain expenditures, so because your expenditures were low in that year, that doesn't mean you go and reduce your budget on an ongoing basis, because your budget is kind of an ongoing figure representative of ongoing results, even though you may have fluctuations from year to year in your actuals. And at the end of the day, if you do have a fluctuation between your actual results and your budget, being your actual results are favorable, that money is going into your reserves, capital, which are extremely light to begin with.
Right,
So it's working to your benefit.
We understand this.
Yeah, okay, well,
But
you asked a question, so I'm answering it.
Yeah. The data that we got for
Can I
this
just say
meeting,
this room has been booked and projected
Oh,
needed
okay.
from 1:30, sorry.
Oh, okay.
One more question was, the proposed fee increase up to $950 from $700. Is that partially, oh, it's been changed again. Sorry.
It's 815, sorry, it's based on the number of
Yeah, I'm just looking
connections.
at my paper,
Yeah.
that's all.
Okay.
we gotta get finished up
So that proposed fee is actually looking to generate an additional $15,000 in revenue, all of which is going to your capital reserves.
Yeah.
And essentially, it's just an increase in the flat.
Yeah, no, I just had a problem with the $950 rather than the $850.
Okay.
So as an aside, and not wanting to take a bunch of time on this, Raj, is it possible for you and I to have a conversation sometime in the next couple of days or so, so that we can go over the Eagle Cliff actuals historical versus what budget forecast we have, so that we can then modify our numbers to more closely represent the needs?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
And will Steph send out the PowerPoint to everybody? I mean, the numbers are all gonna change, but at least we'll have.
David?
And one last question, when will the other LACs see the 2018 final numbers?
2019.
Sorry, 2019, I apologize.
They'll be available, well, our auditors are coming in March, so generally speaking, I mean, actuals will be available in public.
But when do we have to set our rates,
Pardon?
the user rates? When do we have to, we have to send a recommendation to put our
In
rates?
conjunction with, I'm proposing that the user rate bylaws be established in conjunction with the budget process so that they're in effect for 2020.
The issue is the property tax notice.
Yeah, but do you need a recommendation from the, under the LAC
We just
procedure?
listened to what you said.
Do you need to have a recommendation to council that we
I
submit?
think we've got your feedback at this meeting on all of the items, so I will incorporate your feedback in the report to council.
Well, except on the operational budgets, for example, as I said, when Eagle Cliff was presented, I've given you a set of numbers, and I can forward them to you, but it's based on a theoretical 35% increase in actual budget need, and we haven't defined it, haven't absolutely confirmed that yet. Actually, it's more than 35%, I think it's actually closer to 65%.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, yours was about a 61% increase in the revenue, and I applied about 65% increase in the rate.
It's always been.
Two things to
They
consider.
fall off, but they keep falling off.
One, as you may, most of us know, Fort Lot is great. You're watching a 100-year-old line being replaced on gravel trucks at the water.
We adjourned.
The second thing I'd like to say is, when we think about costs, think about highway costs to your residents. The cost of highway, which one can you
Level of service.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm not against spending money,
spend
the money right away.
Yeah.
And like